worst of both worlds.
Right, Uncle Paul, thank you so much for joining us. That's Bloomberg macro strategist. Let's stay with the world of defense. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Palantir and Anduril are part of a group developing software to run President Trump's planned Golden Dome anti-missile shield. Palantir's chief technology officer joined Bloomberg Tech yesterday to discuss AI's role in defense.
Obviously, current operations are ongoing, but I think people will reflect back and say this is the first large-scale combat operation that was really driven, enhanced, made substantially more productive with technology, with AI.
Bloomberg Tech's Caroline Hyde conducted that interview and joins us from Washington. Caroline had the so-called Golden Dome. It was something that had been discussed even before the war in Iran, but Palantir's share prices up nearly 13% since the war broke out. How have the conversations, you've been talking to many tech folks in Washington, D.C., how is the corporate American world reacting to war in Iran, and how are they changing their behavior?
Well, defense tech had already become the theme du jour throughout 2025, 2026, and it's just been amplified ever more so. And there you had really the CTO of Palantir saying AI is at the heart of this conflict like never before. He should know his Maven program system is something that is being used, the smart system, for basically understanding all the software inputs that they're coming in, all of the data, and they then amalgamate that to ensure that really this is becoming a far more efficient targeting system. Now, with that is then Palantir also, as we hear from the Wall Street Journal reporting, Palantir and Anduril maybe becoming command control center for the future of software when it comes to protecting the United States and its territories. This Golden Dome theory, $185 billion project that was already announced, as you say, could be being started to be tested software as soon as this summer. Now, this would really be bringing together other tech companies as well. Scale AI, for example, Swoop is another company that's involved, we understand, according to that reporting. But all of this just shows the billions of dollars that can go to these sorts of companies in long-term commitments coming from the Pentagon more broadly, but also that AI technology is at the heart of future conflict, at the heart of future defense. And that's exactly what we're hearing at Hidden Valley yesterday.
You know, I can't get over this AMD story, or sorry, this ARM story, because for my whole life I've thought of it as a chip designer, and I've always thought it's interesting that they design chips for companies that take those designs and then make them at TSMC. Like, what do the companies actually do? Now, ARM is going to be doing their own chip design. Are they going to be a competitor?
An AGI CPU. Everyone wants in on CPUs. NVIDIA's just come in to take and eat up some of the market share of Intel and AMD as well. It's a fierce fight going on in the world of chips for AI data centers.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and simulcasting on X Spaces. Thank you for joining. If you have a question, please type it in the chat. I'll try to get to it. If you would like, you can also ask for the mic on X Spaces and you'll be live on the show. There are two different versions of the live stream. There's the larger screen, and then there is the smaller screen with the telemetry of the market in real time. Whichever version you would like, it's up to you. Thank you for joining. Please help support the work that I do by donating on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can also help by sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on many modalities: Podomatic, Apple Podcast. On my website under broadcast, you can watch the live streams, the archive of the audio of my podcast. You can also read generated news under broadcast paper. You can also follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, X, Substack, Patreon. There are many ways to help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. I have thousands of videos out there. I'm trying to inform you my opinion about the news, how to benefit from the news flows financially, and also how to improve your health and wellness. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. I have in stock the lemongrass and also the peppermint. Very high quality structural nano silver soaps that will help to neutralize and also improve the health of your skin. Use them every day. Get a few bars for your household. I also have structural nano silver toothpaste. This has no fluoride. It will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, improve your gum health, and with good oral hygiene, you're going to improve your cardiovascular system and your valvular system. A lot of people don't understand that poor oral hygiene can lead to cardiovascular problems. So please go to my store, get the structural nano silver toothpaste. And because this is structural nano silver, this will help to neutralize. So it's really important, especially during the cold season. There's no toothpaste out there that's better than this. So please go to my store, get a few tubes of the toothpaste for your household, use it every day. All right, with that, the big news that took place is that there's these peace negotiations that are happening. Trump is overly enthusiastic about how things are going. The rumor was last night that J.D. Vance was going to be negotiating with the Iranians, and the Iranians didn't want Jared Kushner there. So, so J.D. Vance is involved now. Throughout last night's trading session and early morning, what happened was that oil was stable and trading at around the 88 handle, and energy was trading down. Well, news just came out that the Iranians are not agreeing to the 15-point plan. So it looks like peace talks have failed. So right now, as that news came out, there was a little bit of a tick up in natural gas. Right now, natural gas is trading at 2.899. And the oil market right now is starting to recover. It's now trading at 87.54, but it was trading above 88. So we'll see what happens. Right now, the market, in terms of oil, seems to be hoping for some sort of peace deal. Now, the equity futures are at 6,659. So they're up right now. Trading hasn't begun yet. It'll happen in about 15 minutes, 14 minutes from now. So we'll see what happens. But there's a big question mark. Will the peace talks fail between the Iranians and J.D. Vance? With that, let's listen in to Al Jazeera.
Where insecurity, actually the cause of insecurity, rather than bringing security, all these
Actually, what you're pointing out, if you allow me to jump in, what you're pointing out is that the U.S. and Iranian positions, almost a month into this war, may be further apart now than they were a month ago, because you're saying Iran sees it. The point of the war from the U.S. point of view was to weaken Iran and obtain more favorable, if there is going to be a negotiation at some point to obtain more favorable conditions from Iran. You're telling us that Iran sees itself as having a stronger hand now.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, what United States should learn is that military supremacy doesn't necessarily lead into a kind of a vital victory or a decisive victory at all. And geopolitics is important. Ideology and nationalism is also important. The historical architecture of the region is also important. We should also learn, Washington and other superpower, that this war they should not raise their expectation too high. I mean, the expectations of United States and Israel were regime change, surrender, complete surrender, and weakening Iran. This didn't happen. So don't.
Weakening may have happened. The regime change certainly hasn't. Surrender certainly hasn't. Weakening is hard to assess at this point.
Weakening is relative. You're dealing with a superpower. I mean, Iran's defense budget is $8 billion. United States is $1,000 billion. So it's very relative. And being able to keep United States at least 1,000 kilometers away from the Strait of Hormuz, and making President Trump asking the kind of oil tankers to cross the Strait of Hormuz, projecting bravery, it shows that this military power, this supremacy doesn't necessarily helps much. And in other words, actually, academically speaking, actually changes our understanding of security and power. In this such a very new world, when it's hybrid, you're using a kind of geopolitics, geography is important, time is important, using it as a tool in order to pressure on the financial markets and on oil price and other stuff.
I think still we don't need to speak in abstract terms. This is a region that has been changed forever because of this war. I was at the foreign ministry yesterday talking to the
another big news last night was the paratroopers being deployed to the Middle East. So let's listen in to CNN talking about 1,000 paratroopers are expected to be sent to the Middle East.
Stop and savor the strawberries. That's does.
CNN has learned that around 1,000 U.S. Army paratroops are headed to the Middle East. Now, sources are telling CNN soldiers with the Army's 82nd Airborne Division are expected to deploy in the next few days. Now, here's another question. Why are troops being deployed when President Trump insists talks with Iran are progressing? Now, CNN's chief national security analyst and anchor, Jim Sciutto, is actually on the ground in Tel Aviv. He joins me live. First, can you tell me a little bit about this deployment of troops that we're hearing about?
Yeah. Well, Audie, whatever the president ultimately decides about a ground operation in Iran, all the pieces are now in the region to carry one out. And it's not just the 1,000 paratroopers. You have Marines deployed to the region, and then all the forces, the air transport, etc., that one would require to put troops on the ground, whether that be, you've heard the discussion of Karg Island, which is so central to Iran's energy industry, or perhaps along the shores of the Strait of Hormuz to secure the Strait of Hormuz. We don't know, and ultimately it's up to the president, but at least the pieces are in place. So we're left in a situation not unlike where we were 4 weeks ago before the start of the war, where you have two tracks at the same time. You have diplomatic discussions with Iran, or at least now laying the groundwork for those discussions, with an enormous military buildup. We saw what happened 4 weeks ago. The president chose the military option, saying that the talks weren't going anywhere. So we're left in that situation again. Will the president decide that the talks aren't going anywhere in his view, and then deploy further military action up to and including ground forces? We don't know. I will tell you from here in Israel, there's a great deal of skepticism as to whether there is actual potential for real peace negotiations right now.
I'm joined now by Malcolm Nance. He's a retired U.S. Naval Intelligence Officer and a national security expert. Good to have you this morning, Malcolm. Thank you. Two sources tell CNN that approximately 1,000 U.S. soldiers now preparing to deploy to be available for Iran operations, as it were. And you've listed some of the units and hardware that make up this force, saying, quote, "This force is not leverage. This is a commitment to take action." What action do you expect at this point?
Well, we're talking about the 82nd Airborne Brigade sending out 1,000 troops out there. They are paratroopers, or they're soldiers who are going to be hella lifted into whatever their objective are. The issue that's not being talked about is the 500 or 100 or more special operations soldiers that are being stationed in Jordan and Israel right now, who are an elite assault force. So whatever the Trump administration has planned, it is offensive. It is not defensive at all. The 82nd Airborne is a backup force for these spear-tip units like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 that, objectives like Karg Island are just too small for that. That's something that one special forces unit can do, but they're bringing in Rangers, they're bringing in others. Even taking the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, Lara, Hormuz, Kishem, Hangam, Lesser Tomb, Greater Tomb, Abu Musa, Kish, and Siri, that is still a massive force for this. So the question is, do they have multiple intent here? Take the Strait of Hormuz islands, take Karg Island, and then possibly a land operation somewhere in Iran. That's what this spells out. But it's really up to the White House to make clear why they need this force there if they're in end-state negotiations.
Can you just game plan that for me slightly more? Just, I'm really interested to learn from you very specifically what these forces that you describe are equipped to do.
Right. Well, first, let's look at the Marines in the Tripoli Amphibious Readiness Group. That's about 2,500 Marines. Their job is to do a forced landing on hostile shores or islands. A group like that could be used against, Bandar Jas, which is a large secondary oil pumping facility for Iran on the Indian Ocean, or to hazard their warships to go through the Strait of Hormuz and launch from ships and do an amphibious landing on like Larak or Kishem Island. That danger. They have helicopters they can do it with. They have landing craft they can do it with. But it's easily mined and it's easy narrow channel to attack with anti-ship missiles, even if you have heavy air defenses. They put the helicopter over the Musandam Peninsula and land on islands like Abu Musa, which belongs to the United Arab Emirates, at Lesser Tum, Greater Tum. They could do it in an extensive bombing campaign on these islands this week by the U.S. government. But one thing they didn't do was they did not bomb the airstrips, which means that they look at like they're going to use that for future operations. Kishem Island, the one that's shaped like a shark, is much more extensive. It's 53 villages. It requires water from desalinization. That's a massive target. That's something that the Marines themselves may make an initial landing, but you could paradrop the 82nd Airborne troops there. But that's fraught with danger because you have to have absolute aerial control. You have to be sure there's no surface-to-air missiles, and you could lose or injure people just jumping out of the airplanes onto that big island. But Delta Force, the Rangers, they could easily take Carter Island in a matter of an hour. It's a question of keeping it without getting bombarded day and night.
I wonder whether
YouTube Premium is ad-free YouTube and the YouTube Music app all together.
I wonder whether you believe that the deployment of these troops has been part of the long-term planning and strategy, or whether this is a US administration. I don't want to say making things up as they go along, because I have no idea, what the thinking has been behind the scenes. But, I wonder whether this is sort of layering on sort of new opportunities that Pete Hegseth wants to be able to provide for Donald Trump at this point.
I'll speak frankly as a former intelligence professional. They're winging this. Every military activity that we see does not show phased planning that was part of a strategic campaign in the pre-war, where the Pentagon thought about it, prepared it, and had it ready. None of these forces were ready, especially the Marines. I mean, they seem to be an afterthought. I think in response to Donald Trump's rhetoric about, let's take the Strait of Hormuz, you are now seeing the system spool up to take the Strait of Hormuz. There's no taking it. So long as Iran can deny the sea, which they could do with any ship missile launched 300 miles away, this is going to be a very hard nut to crack. Worse, Becky, once the fighting starts, no one is moving any ships. There's no chance anyone's going to insure a vessel that's going to go when there is massive fighting in the Strait of Hormuz.
I've got reporting that says that key regional partner Saudi Arabia certainly wants Iran's missile capabilities sort of closed out, degraded before this war ends. So they've said to me very specifically they don't want civilian infrastructure targeted. The Wall Street Journal reports that Gulf allies, including the UAE, where I am, are considering joining this fight because they've been so relentlessly targeted in Iran's retaliation strikes or attacks. I mean, they call them reckless and unprovoked. There is no suggestion as of yet that the UAE or the Saudis are prepared to jump in offensively in this fight and join, the US here. But I wonder what a coalition would look like and achieve, and just how much degradation do you believe of Iran's military capabilities we've seen to date to ensure long-term stability in the region where I am?
Well, a coalition is not hard to put together. I mean, the GCC already has its informal networks for the militaries. The UAE would probably work with the United States in recovering an island that was stolen from them, Abu Musa Island. The Iranians just summarily took that some 20 or some odd years ago. The Saudis, on the other hand, have a big armed force, but the key component of that is using their air power to provide cover and defense for U.S. forces and other forces in the country, that are coming along and seizing these literal islands. As far as degrading Iran's ballistic missile capability, let's all be realistic here, okay? You cannot just say it and it's done. If it's going to be a question of degrading it and before we declare the war, we're going to be here a year because those missiles can be hidden, they can be moved around. We haven't even gotten into the large number of short-range ballistic missiles that they have, and we could hunt them for some time to come, just as we did in Iraq. But now you're talking an extended period of strife, the Gulf, Strait of Hormuz not opening, and quite possibly even worse, bringing the Houthi rebels into this, and they open this war to, and attack Saudi Arabia from the west and close the Bab el-Mandab waterway.
Malcolm, your perspective's really valuable. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Malcolm Nance with us this morning. Thank you.
All right, the New York session has begun. All right. Let's start with equities here. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,619. VIX is at 25.65. I have a year-end target for the S&P 500 at 7,400 to 7,800, so it's time to buy. Buy equities. Now there's a support level at 6,600 that keeps on breaking and then becoming a support level again, breaking, becoming a support level. So we have to see if the negotiations in the Middle East take hold that are positive, and then therefore the 6,600 support level will reestablish and equities will creep upward. If not, if it's further conflict, paratroopers and Marines and missiles and all this stuff that happens, then you're going to see us testing 6,450 for the S&P 500. The Euro USD is stable. It's at 115. It's been in that range for quite a while now. Oil is trading at $87.72. Bitcoin is trading at just under 72,000, and the Japanese yen is trading at 159. So we're seeing, in relative terms, the dollar's stable. Actually, maybe the dollar's strengthening a little bit, depending on the currency, especially compared to the Japanese yen. Natural gas is trading at 2.911. All right. Now, what you want to take a look at in terms of oil moves here is the 3 times leverage ETF, UCO and SCO. UCO is trading at 30.06 and SCO is trading, I believe, at 8.655. So UCO is longing oil, so if oil's going to go up, that ETF will go up. And SCO is the inverse. So we should see, if we have positive news about de-escalation, we should see UCO precipitously drop and you'll start to see SCO start to climb. All right. So that's shorting oil. Now, natural gas is drifting down. So you want to take a look at the ETF COLD, spelled with a K, KOLD. All right. Now, another way to look at this is to take a look at Gush and DRIP. Gush is trading at $43 a share, roughly, and DRIP is the inverse of Gush, and it's 4.28. I believe both of those are 2 times leverage. So that's a little bit of a market cap. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gel. You can get it in the tube form or in the quick dispenser form. Have some at home or at work. You never know when you need it. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put it on the lesion. It'll help to heal it. This will also help to improve the health of your skin as a topical. And if you're not feeling well, or someone around you is not feeling well during the cold season, put it on your hands, around your eyes, around your ears, around your mouth, around your nose. Lightly coat your nostrils. It will stay active for 5.5 hours, and it will neutralize. So please go to my store, get the structural nanosilver gel. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a daily skincare. It's really important to have because you never know when you need it. Also, vitamin C and magnesium will help to boost up your immune system, help with brain function, and also help with the health of your skin. This stacks well with using the topical structural nanosilver gel because both of these will help with skin health. Now, vitamin C and the magnesium is really important for immune system, but also brain function. Magnesium and zinc boosts up that immune system and helps with brain function. And magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. So you can stack these together or take them separately, but it's important to take magnesium daily. So please go to my store, get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. Use discount 5, all caps, you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, with that, I want to go to BBC on their take about these negotiations.
Iran's military has accused the United States of negotiating with itself over the conflict in the Middle East. A spokesperson added, "Someone like us will never come to terms with someone like you." Well, President Trump insists his administration is talking to the right people in Iran and that they badly want a deal to end the war. Well, Mr. Trump also claimed he had been given a great prize by Iranian negotiators, adding it was related to oil and gas and the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has said what it called non-hostile vessels can pass through the strait, which is critical to the global economy. Well, from Washington, David Willis begins our coverage.
Amid talk of peace, the war continues in the Middle East. The report suggests the Trump administration has come up with a 15-point plan aimed at ending the fighting, and that negotiations are already underway. Pakistan, which acted as intermediary, is offering to host peace talks. President Trump says Iran is desperate for a deal.
They have no Navy left. They have no Air Force left. They have no anti-aircraft equipment left, no radar left, no leaders left. The leaders are all gone. Nobody knows who to talk to. But we're actually talking to the right people, and they want to make a deal so badly.
He followed that with the startling claim that Iran had already agreed to abandon its nuclear ambitions, and added that they had given the US a gift.
They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant prize.
All the president would say is that it was related to this vital stretch of waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, and the oil and gas that passes through it. Iran has now said it will allow so-called non-hostile vessels to pass through here safely, provided they coordinate with Iranian authorities. Tehran is yet to comment on the latest claims by President Trump, having previously denied that any such negotiations were taking place. And amid all the talk of peace, the US is deploying more troops to the Middle East. The amphibious assault vessel USS Tripoli is en route from Japan, leading one of 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, and an elite contingent of paratroopers is on its way from the 82nd Airborne Division. Meanwhile, Iran continues to lash out at its neighbors, a reminder that for all the talk of negotiation, this conflict is far from over. David Willis, BBC News.
So let's get the very latest. We can cross over to Doha. Our security correspondent, Frank Gardner.
Let me just interject
there.
and
Frank,
just
once
give you
again-
my perspective of what I think is happening. I don't think Trump is negotiating with himself. I think what's happening is there's factions because there's no real leader, that there is a faction that we're dealing with to try to de-escalate the situation where they do have control of some weapons. There's other factions that have control of other weapon caches. Because of this, we're like creating a wedge. So the ones that are probably telegraphing in the mainstream media that Trump's just negotiating with himself, well, he may be not negotiating with them, but he's negotiating with a different faction. And maybe, hopefully, now again, this is just a hypothesis. I can't prove this, but if this is happening and we're negotiating with a faction that is a little bit more open to the 15-point plan, they may be also open to aligning with the seculars within the society. So it's probably some sort of wedging effect that Trump is dealing with. Now, think about Trump. Trump has done a lot of deals, right? Forget about his presidency. Think about his whole career. He's done a lot of deals and contracts and construction and licensing deals, all right? So when you're in these kinds of deals, when you're especially in construction, you may be trying to bid on some property to develop, but you have other developers that are trying to bid too. And it's so sometimes you position yourself in a way where you're working with another developer, right, to be able to fight against a different developer. I think this strategy that I just mentioned is a similar strategy on what Trump is doing. He's working with a faction that we probably can deal with in terms of the 15-point plan, while the other faction may be more official in terms of making decisions, isn't willing to deal with. So we're trying to push them aside and make them irrelevant. I think that's what's happening. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's happening with these negotiations. And so you have one group that's willing to work with you, and they're saying, well, we need you to also knock out this other group. So this is where we need the Marines. This is where we need the paratroopers. And if we can knock out this other group, then maybe we can stabilize the region. So we'll see what's happening. I don't think he's just negotiating with himself. I think he's negotiating with a fractured Iranian government, and he's dealing with one of the factions that are a little bit more aligned with what we're thinking versus the other factions that are more intransigent, more hardliners that aren't willing to go with the peace accord or peace agreement. All right, let's finish listening into BBC.
Different competing narratives about this war. Where are we with what is happening? Who's talking to who?
So I think what is happening is that messages are being passed from the United States indirectly to Iran via intermediaries like Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. That's happening. That's not the same as negotiations. And I think what we're seeing is that the White House appears to be, in certainly what people here think, rather inflating the passage of messages into the idea of some kind of a deal, because that's being vigorously denied by Iran. And I have to say that the best way to drive Iran away from a deal is to keep saying publicly that Iran is desperate for a deal. That's not going to appeal to this very stubborn, defiant, and surprisingly
See what I mean?
resilient Iranian
See the
regime.
mainstream media with BBC, how they're focused on, well, there's only one singular point to deal with Iran. Well, maybe there are multiple points that are fighting each other politically, that are trying to gain a little bit more favor for better outcomes for themselves. So why do we assume that there's only one point to deal with?
Which is essentially now the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, because the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is gone. He's been assassinated. We haven't seen from his successor, Mustafa Khamenei. He's not appeared in public. So we've got to assume that the military, the hardcore Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, are in charge. They've spread out their control laterally, horizontally, as it were, amongst the 31 provinces. They're still acting on orders. They've got.
Are they really? How do you know that? How does he know this? I think there's infighting going on in the IRGC on what to do. And they're getting worried that if they continue following the plan, that they're going to die, or going to be captured, or they're going to be prosecuted in the end. I think they're trying to find a way where they find survivability post-war with the United States. And you could see some of this type of dynamic that was taking place even during World War II with the Germans. The Germans, near the end, were like not willing to fight, and they wanted the German forces, and they wanted to, find some way of survivability. Something similar is happening here.
Extraordinary resilience. They are in control largely of the Strait of Hormuz. They are charging shipping $2 million a time for every vessel that comes through there, saying you can come through, you can't. You're an aggressor. You belong to an aggressor state.
So the faction that may be not working with Trump may be in control of that area, but there may be another faction that's in control of a different area. And if we work with that in that group, maybe we can put pressure on the other group with our forces and the IRG forces that are more aligned with what we want, and we annihilate this group within the IRGC that's not willing to play ball. I think that's highly probable. Now, again, it's a hypothesis, but why does he assume that they're a horizontal organization, but why do you assume that there's not breakaway? Maybe they're breaking apart. How do you know that? I mean, if they're noticing, lots of bombs from the United States, there is no way that they can survive our military. The question is, how much pain do we want to incur to get the job done? That's the big issue here. It's not that we can't get it done. I think his analysis is too simple. It's assuming that it's monolithic, that the IRGC is monolithic. I don't think it is.
They're exporting over 1 million barrels a day of their own Iranian oil through the Strait of Hormuz to China and to India, while Gulf Arab states' oil and gas is sitting idle here on this side of the Gulf. It's a terrible situation for the Arab Gulf states. It's a pretty strong one for Iran, and the US is not, despite what it says, achieving its aims in this war.
So, Frank, just help us to understand. As you say, Iran has these 31 provinces. All of these provinces have their own effective Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Who is in charge of the overall, if you like, the federal part of it? Because there's got to be somebody heading this. We know that Mustafa Khamenei is not seen. Is there one person that is overseeing all of this?
To be honest, I think that's probably a question you need to put to an Iranian expert, of which I'm not. But we do know that prior to his assassination a few days ago, Ali Larijani, not Ayatollah, Ali Larijani, who was the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in Iran, a very experienced former Speaker of Parliament, but he was certainly reported to be overall running the conduct of the war. Other reports are saying that Mohammed Khalibaf is a Speaker of the Parliament, is in some way in charge, but I think we're perhaps looking at it through the wrong lens. Iran planned for this day. It had wargamed and practiced and rehearsed for this day. All those IRGC commanders in the 31 provinces are acting on pre-existing orders that have been left by the Supreme Commander, the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, before he died. And until those orders are countermanded, they are going to carry on with the existing orders they've got, firing drones and missiles at targets of this side of the Gulf. Intermittent,
unless they think that their plan won't work and they need to have their survival instinct kick in. It's too simple to say, well, they're just going to follow the plan and they're not going to care about their own survival as an organization or as an individual within this horizontal structure that they have. No, survival instinct's going to kick in. This is too simple. This is a too simplistic overview of what's going on there. They're just going to follow, or all of them are just going to follow orders. Yet they're broken up into 31, areas and groups, and then all of them are going to be monolithic. All of them are going to just die for the cause, and not one of them will be aligned with the West. Yeah, right.
Been struck here in Qatar since last week, since about Thursday. But other states, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the Emirates are being hit. And most importantly, the Strait of Hormuz is being partially strangled by Iran, only allowing through its own oil to its own friends. And as I say, that is giving an enormous amount of strategic power to what's left of this regime. So the power is spread out horizontally rather than vertically before.
Frank, as always, really good to get your analysis, Frank Gardner.
But it's horizontally, but they're all monolithic, and they will all follow the orders that were predetermined, and their survival instinct won't kick in. Really? That didn't happen in Germany. Survival instinct is a really important feature to carry on your DNA. Too simplistic. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the lignans. This will help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. When you do this, it's going to slow down the aging process. It's going to help with your brain function because you're reducing inflammation and stress with your neurons. You're reducing plaque formation for the vascular system. By bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, you're helping your immune system. It's really important. So please go to my store, get the lignans. And also the ashwagandha root helps to bring down cortisol levels, helps to control your blood glucose levels. When you do this, when you take this every day, you're going to help with your cardiovascular health, your immune system, and your brain function. Now, you can stack these together to get synergistic benefits. So please go to my store, get the lignans, get the ashwagandha root, take it every day, and it's going to slow down the aging process and help all these different organ systems that I just mentioned. And get vitamin D3. This will help to increase your bone density, help to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis, especially if they're infected. And vitamin D3 also helps with cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's see here. This is interesting. I want to play, we're going to go off on a tangent here. National Review, which is conservative, it's a conservative platform started by William F. Buckley. But I want to hear this podcast that was just released an hour ago by National Review. Why are people so obsessed with the Jews? Right? Let's see if we get any insight. I haven't seen the video. It looks like he's going to play some Joe Rogan. So let's get some insight from National Review.
Hey everyone, I don't know whether you caught this clip from Joe Rogan a little while ago, but it's very telling and very relevant to what's going on. Take a look.
For example, Judaism. You mentioned earlier Judaism. Do you know how many Jews there are in the world? 12 what?
No, yes.
You want to take just not to put you on the spot.
Okay, let me think.
How many?
There's 7 billion people in the world.
Yes.
I would guess there would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 billion Jews.
1 billion.
No.
500.
No. Here, it's about 20 million. All right. Now there's some details to go into this. There's about 20 million, maybe 22 million. And here's the weird thing about it. Some people that think they're Jewish, they're not really Jewish. And some people that don't think they're Jewish are Jewish. So the assumption is that the ones that think that they're Jewish that aren't really Jewish, and the ones that are Jewish but don't know, they kind of cross cancel. All right? So if you assume that flow out and flow back in terms of true population, it's about 20 to 22 million, maybe 25 million. All right, let's continue.
Maybe I'm going to take a very conservative guess. I'm going to change it to 500 million.
I'm so glad that we did this. You're going to be shocked.
How many?
There's somewhere between 13 to 15 million Jews.
It's about
That's
20.
more than that
It's
in
around
New York.
20.
No, you're out of your mind.
No, just look it up.
Shut the mic up. This guy's talking crazy.
It's around 20.
I'm a Zionist shill. Let Jamie now do his little Google magic.
13 to 15 million? That's
13 to 15 million.
And
National Review, and that.
And what's interesting is that when the Messianic time comes, what is called the Nasi, the ones that are super wise, they will be able to look at someone and know if they're Jewish or not. Not because of their physical features, but because they can see the soul. Because the Jewish soul has 5 layers to it. And they see this 5th layer. Now, I know this sounds, it doesn't sound like it's scientific, but from a metaphysical point of view here, the Nasi, the ones that will be setting the stage for the Jews to get purified by the red heifer. First, before you sprinkle the red heifer, ashes, the ashes are put into purified water and you're sprinkled, and that will purify individuals that were by anything that died. All right. You become impure when you're around dead things, dead animal, dead insects, whatever it is. All right. You automatically get impure. Well, you have to purify yourself. They wouldn't waste the purification water and ashes from the red heifer on non-Jews because non-Jews don't participate in the temple. So they have to have a filter to know who's Jewish and who's not Jewish. There's about 20 million people in the world that are Jewish, really Jewish. All right? The Nasi will know. Now, how they know, that's way beyond my understanding. But they will know. And they will tell Jews that they thought for ages thought they were Jewish. They're going to say, you're not Jewish. And they're going to tell people that were not Jewish, that never knew that they were Jewish, they're going to be told you are Jewish. And then there's most likely going to be the same thing that took place. I think it was right before the 10 commandments coming down, before the tablets coming down. There was a massive preparation for the males for circumcision. Now, you have to remember the Hebrews were in Egypt, and they went out. They went through the Exodus, right? But what we call Jewish didn't really get established until Mount Sinai. So they had to prepare the Hebrews to make sure that the males were pure enough to be able to receive the commandments from Mount Sinai. So that means for the males, they had to do a massive circumcision and prepare for that. But it also meant that the females had to go through a mikvah. They had to go through a spiritual bathing to prepare themselves for this coming of the commandments. And everything after that is what we would call Jewish. Well, once the Messianic era comes, the Messiah and ones under them are going to determine who's Jewish and who's not. And then they're going to be told, you have to go through now another ritual that was similar to what happened at Mount Sinai. Massive circumcision, if they're not circumcised, or blood drawn, if they're already been circumcised. Because you want to set the field that everything is pure. And the women go into a ritual purity through the bathing, the mikvah. And it sets everything, resets everything. So everyone after that is Jewish. Anyone that didn't go through that process, even if they had a long lineage of being Jewish, at that moment in time, if they don't participate in this, they're not Jewish anymore. So there's a more complex thing that's happening here. So you have millions of people that don't think they're Jewish, but are really Jewish. There are also millions of people that think they're Jewish that are not Jewish. But it basically cancels. Basically. Maybe a little bit more on the Jewish side than the non-Jewish side, but it basically cross cancels. So let's just throw that. So it's approximately 20 million Jews in the world. So a lot of people don't understand some of these nuances. And there will be Jews going all the way back to Mount Sinai that may not want to participate in the Messianic next phase. If they don't participate, they're no longer Jewish.
A Canadian academic named Gad Sad talking to the famous podcaster Joe Rogan and eliciting this amazing answer. It's kind of understandable, right? Given how obsessed we are with the Jews, how much discussion is devoted to the Jews and energy there is around various questions related to Jews, where Rogan says there are 1 billion Jews in the world and then downgrades to 500 million and is still off by orders of magnitude. We're only talking about 12 or 15 million Jews in the world. So why is this incredible obsession with such an extremely small population in the scheme of things and in reality compared to other religions? It's just worth dwelling on this point before we move on and talk about why everyone is so obsessed with the Jews. So let's look at these population charts from Wikipedia. I don't know whether these numbers are exactly right, but they're obviously ballpark. Christianity has 2.3 billion adherents around the world. Islam, 2 billion. Hinduism, 1.2 billion. Buddhism, 300 million. Various folk religions, 200 million. So those are big numbers. Judaism isn't anywhere close. Then we look at the medium-sized religions. You got Shinto, 89 million.
Oh, that surprises me that Shinto has 89 million. Tao, 12 to 173 million. Wow. And it's so there's also another nugget of knowledge that you should think about here. What we call heaven, or Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, is only for a certain percentage of the people. All right? It just doesn't mean just Jews, or, it could be Tao's and Christians and even Buddhists and Muslims, right? It depends on what kind of life you lived. But the population, only 10% of the world population will see heaven. And because there's a fractal, there is this Fibonacci sequence that's happening in nature, where there is multiples of a number, there is a spiral, things rhyme, right? Well, the same thing is happening with the actual composition of religions. What are the two big religions? Christianity and Islam. They're at the larger arc of the Fib sequence. They're farther away from the center in terms of population. But when you look at it in terms of the Abrahamic faiths, the Abrahamic religions, Judaism is the smallest. It's near the center of the Fib sequence. And so just like heaven or God Eden is only for 10% of the population, getting close to the core, getting close to the center of the Abrahamic religions is a similar multiple. Small in population at the core, larger population when you leave the core, and that Fib sequence starts to spiral. All right? So I know this sounds kind of like woo-woo kind of, but there is a dynamic that's taking place in terms of the population of religions, and actually a population that actually sees and gets into heaven. Now, that doesn't mean all Jews get into heaven, they don't. But what we are seeing in terms of population is a similar mapping or a similar dynamic to the number of people in the world population that will actually see heaven. Everyone else is going to be lower on the rung. So 90% of the people will not see the upper level of heaven. 90% of the people out there.
Taoism, big range here, I don't know why. 12 million to 173 million. Yoruba, not sure what this is. 50 million to 100 million. Voodoo, know what that is, stay away. 60 million. Sikhs, 25 to 30 million. So we're pretty far down. We're still not anywhere close to Judaism. Judaism, about 15 million. As discussed, Spiritism, again, not quite sure what that is, could be as many. How often do we hear about the Spiritists? Not very often. We got the Unification Church at 10 million. Isn't that amazing? Another way to look at it is this bar chart. This breaks down the major religions by their share of the world population. Christianity, 32%. Islam, 23%. Unaffiliated, right up there, 16. Hindus, 15%. Buddhists, 7%. Folk religionists, there they are again, 6%. Then all the way down here at the bottom, Jews, 0.2% of the world population.
See what I mean? The Fib sequence, you can see it with the bar chart here. Christianities are larger out in the Fib sequence. Muslims are a little bit closer, but still farther out. And then it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Buddhism is closer to the source of the Fib sequence than the Christians are, based on fractals, mathematics. All right. Now, it is interesting that when you're talking about the battle of civilization, it's really between Muslims and Christians, not Muslims and Jews. Now, a lot of people say, what? Just the sheer volume of people. 32% of the population of the world relative to 23% of the population of the world. Now, what is amazing, and I think evidence of blessing, is that the Jews are still alive fighting Islam. 23% of the population of the world versus 0.2%. Wait a minute. You would think that the Muslims would have dominated. Well, they haven't, obviously. But the real issue here in our time is the battle between Western culture and Middle Eastern culture. And that's the battle between Islam and Christianity. So all these people that are out there going, oh, the bad Jews, the bad Jews, the bad Jews. Well, you better wake up. You already have crusade number, 3.0. Wake up. You better win. Better win.
Amazing. Another way to look at it is how Israel stacks up versus other countries in terms of total population. So here we have this list via Wikipedia, once again, please forgive me, of countries by population. And you got to go way down here somewhere. We'll find it in a second, I'm sure, to find Israel. Here it is, number 92, right above it is Azerbaijan. Right below is Papua New Guinea. Neither of which you hear very much about compared to number 92, sandwiched right there in between them. Now, admittedly, sheer population is not necessarily the best way to judge the importance of a country. Israel punches above its weight. It's very technologically advanced. It's in a really religiously sensitive and consequential part of the world. All that is true. Still, the point that we started this video with remains. We are talking about a tiny slice of the world population, and yet so many people are completely obsessed by these.
And that size of the population is a fractal representation of who will be in heaven, who will experience heaven. Now, that doesn't mean all the Jews are going to be there, because they're not. But the point is that population change, ones that are good people will get into heaven. I would think most people would agree with this, all right? Independent of what your religion is. And there's an awful lot of Christians, and there's going to be an awful lot of Muslims that don't get there. That's a fact. That's just going to be a fact when you look at the sheer numbers of absolute numbers in the world. 9 billion people. Less than 1 billion are going to see heaven.
Well, let me give you an indication of a couple examples of what I mean. One, there's been a lot of discussion about how Israel and the Jewish lobby forced Donald Trump into the Iran war, when you could make that argument, say, about Saudi Arabia. Here's a New York Times headline. Saudi leader is said to push Trump to continue Iran war in recent calls. The Saudis also reportedly pushed Trump to launch the war in the first place, but we don't hear lots of people out there saying the Saudis are responsible for this war. The Saudis forced Trump into war. This is a war for Saudi Arabia. No, why not? Because the Saudis aren't Jews. Same thing with the Charlie Kirk assassination.
So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that. It's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
So Joe Kent is clearly implying there that the Jews might have killed Charlie Kirk. If we're going to blame religious minorities, why not the Mormons? There are a lot of Mormons in Utah, but no, that is not as emotionally satisfying. That isn't as resonant in all sorts of ways as blaming the Jews. So why this obsession with, again, this very small percentage of the world's population? Well, I think that goes to the mystery and the scandal, if you will, of the Jews, and involves some really deep and profound factors. One is that thanks to ancient exiles, thanks to expulsions during the Middle Ages, thanks to a mobility because of involvement in urban professions and trade and things like that, and other horrific displacements, you have Jews all over the place. So if in your society you want to blame someone for something, blame an outsider or a foreign influence for something, they're the Jews. And the fact is, as a general matter, Jews tend to be high achievers, tend to be accomplished. So then you have envy focused on them. Thomas Sowell has made this point about anti-Semitism. What can Jews themselves do to stop anti-Semitism? Fail. Because as long as you succeed, you're going to be hated. In the U.S. context, you have Jews overrepresented in various fields, whether it's finance or filmmaking or the media, leading to the lazy and crude belief that Jews must be controlling these industries.
And this plays right in, this dovetails into what I've been saying, that what's going to happen on September 11th, 2026. There is going to be a curse on this earth, and no one is going to be able to hide. Not the Jews, not the Muslims, not the Christians, not the Americans, not the Israelis, not the Saudi. Everybody's going to get a curse. Why? Because mankind keeps on fucking up and is not trying to find peace and prosperity for all. No, we want to demonize. That's what mankind wants. Look at your social media. When you scroll, do you think that society is healthy? If you think society is healthy based on what you're seeing in social media, you need to be checked by a psychiatrist. All right? So the reality of the situation is this. Mankind doesn't deserve the blessing. Look at what has happened since October 7th. Has mankind gotten better? No. It's gotten worse. Look at the division between the ultra-liberal and the conservative. What about secular society versus religious society? Do you think that we're healing the planet? Or do you think we're causing more harm? What about the urban sprawl? Are we making things better for future generations in terms of making sure they're not in debt? Every baby that's born today, assuming they survive the abortion rights that have been pushed by the ultra-liberal, but every baby that's born today in the United States, they have a serious debt that they have to deal with. Because we, as a society, have incurred so much debt, and we're just going to kick the can down the road and let other generations deal with it, to the point where they won't be able to deal with it. You think that's right? You think it's fair? What about our responsibilities? We don't deserve the blessing. And therefore, a curse is coming.
Secondly, you have the unbelievable, the bizarre, the miraculous persistence, the sheer persistence of the Jewish people. The great Southern novelist Walker Percy famously wrote about this. Where are the Hittites, he wrote. Why does no one find it remarkable that in most world cities today there are Jews but not a single Hittite? Even though the Hittites had a great flourishing civilization, while the Jews nearby were a weak and obscure people. When one meets a Jew in New York or New Orleans or Paris or Melbourne, it is remarkable that no one considers the event remarkable. What are they doing here? But it's even more remarkable to wonder, if there are Jews here, why are there not Hittites here? Where are the Hittites? Show me one.
Now think about it. Think about this. In terms of stable governments, the United States is the longest. We have, the United States has a short relative history compared to the UK. But in terms of a stable government, continuing government, there's no government in the world that is long-lasting as the United States. Now, take that one step further. There's really no religion that is as continuous as the Jewish religion. Now, let that sit in your head for a while. And then you wonder, how's this happen? Now, metaphysically, it's a blessing, a kav, an energy force that blesses things. Now, sometimes they shouldn't get blessed. Other times they are blessed. We're not God. We don't understand the whole dynamics. Can you understand why Trump is blessed? He sure as hell is. But why? I can't explain that. So, blessing from God, going against it is kind of stupid. Go against Trump when you know that this guy's blessed? Yeah, he's rough on the edges and he, does some bad things on the side and, who knows, all right? But the guy's blessed. So does it make sense to go against the blessing? We don't know why God is blessing Trump. He's some sort of vehicle for something that is happening on the world stage. And we're just, no matter how smart you are, no one's smart enough to understand it. We can get glimpses of maybe, but we don't know for sure. The Jewish people couldn't survive what they went through if they weren't blessed. So does it make sense for a society to go against that blessing? To demonize those people? Because you're demonizing the blessing. Do you think things are going to turn out well for you? I don't think so. I don't think so.
In New York City. This raises the question, why are these people still here? They're supposed to naturally disappear or even be destroyed. The great Rabbi Jonathan Sachs made this point. The first reference to Israel outside the Hebrew Bible is on the Merneptah stele, a slab of black granite engraved in the days of Pharaoh Merneptah, successor to Ramses II, the man some scholars identify as the Pharaoh of Exodus. It says, Israel is laid waste, her seed is no more. The first reference to Israel outside the Bible is an obituary. Israel's enemies thought it was dead. Then there's the Arch of Titus in Rome, depicting Rome's destruction of the Second Temple, the destruction of Israel and the exile of the Jewish people. So why are they still here, given all that? No one else, after all that, would still be here. Something must be up. Maybe something's not right. Something's going on. We at least should just ask questions about it. But more than just persisting and still being here, the Jews claim to be at the center of the universe. They've made this extraordinary discovery about the nature of God. They stand at the root of the Abrahamic faith. They claim to be the chosen.
The Jews are not the center of the universe. It's New York City, all right? Get it straight.
People. These people were spread all around the world and are so tiny and powerless. How can that be? Then also, more than just persisting, the Jews have returned to the Holy Land. They've returned to Jerusalem after these exiles, after all the dispossessions, after praying for this and hoping for this and saying it was going to happen. They've made the desert bloom. What do we do with that? So the Jews almost command our attention, and it can take two forms, or at least there are two sides of the spectrum. On the one hand, you can marvel at the Jewish people and all they've accomplished. On the other hand, you can think there's something not right. There's some sort of dark magic at work. And this becomes an obsession that can lead, as we see from history, to
and
madness.
This is what is written down in the Zohar, all right? If you have two groups, something evil and something good. The ones that are good and evil, it's all based on some sort of relative position. The ones that are evil will think they're good. The ones that are good will think that their enemy is evil. All right? And there's a battle that's going on here. So, just like what it says in the Zohar, Esau is going to die. Benjamin is going to chop his fucking head off. All right? And his head will be buried with his father, buried with his father, Isaac. All right? And the body, which represents the animal within Esau, is discarded and not allowed to be buried with the patriarchs. This is the battle between the bad and the good, the evil and the good, all right? And so the bad, the evil, is going to like go, well, Jacob is going to try to kill Esau. And we're Esau. So we got to demonize Jacob because we don't want to die. We can't die. We have our attachment to Satan. And so they try to demonize what is happening, which is already written what will happen. Again, a Fibonacci sequence. What happened in the Bible is what's happening today at a larger scale. What happened to Esau is what's going to happen to a group of people. It's a larger sequence. It's a bigger arc. More people are involved.
Murder. And as long as we've had Jews, we've basically had anti-Semitism. There's almost something innate in human nature that leads people this way. There's something spiritual.
And that's the Satan attaching to the goof, the body that's animalistic, trying to prevent the intellect to override the power of evil within the body. And so societies that are more aligned, that have a soul root that's tied to Esau, is going to be more affected by this. Because if they don't repent and improve their intellectual part and subdue their animal part, if they don't do that, the world events and the metaphysics of this, they'll start to have conflict. There will be a rage that takes place because Satan wants Jacob dead, because Satan knows that if Esau dies, he loses the energy force. Now, I'm not making this up. It's written down in the Zohar. So go and read it. But there's too many people that want to demonize and not educate themselves and realize that there was actually a warning that this was going to fucking take place. All right. No one wanted to pay attention to the warnings. Everyone wanted to be, living in their own little world. They wanted to have cognitive dissonance. All right, fine. But it's still going to happen.
I don't think that's going away. So there's no choice but to be obsessed with the Jews in one sense or another. But every person of goodwill in this country should hope and pray it's a healthy interest rather than the sort we have seen gaining traction in the United States, both on the left and the right. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
If mankind doesn't repent from what has been transpiring for the last 3 years, by the time September 11, 2026 happens, and the shofar is not blown on the Sabbath during Rosh Hashanah, there's going to be a curse. Now, there is some time between now and then to actually try to get the world in a better place. And you personally, in your own little world, your own little personal realm, get into a better place. Because if you don't, something bad's going to happen. All right. Let's listen to Cash Jordan and how Mondani is hurting the middle class in New York City.
so that everyone can actually stay in the city.
So, as the mayor of New York confirms there's this mass exodus from the city, he also confirms he's powerless to stop it, because raising taxes isn't going to keep folks here. Instead, it's just going to drive them out even faster, which is going to make it hard to pay for all of the free programs he's promised, like frozen rent and free grocery stores, unless forcing people from New York has been the agenda the entire time.
Of course it was.
What do millionaires get in your state other than demonized? It's not patriotic to stay in New York. It's idiotic. You want companies to come back? You're going to have to incentivize them.
Now what do you do? There's buyer's remorse. So a week ago, we covered the clip for all the people with the megaphone were saying, hey, I own a house here, and they were flipping out. The news media didn't want to talk about it, but he was a citizen stating what you're just saying. I have buyer's remorse.
Yeah. This plays out in every state.
And this plays right into what I stated, that Mondani is nothing but Napoleon the Pig in Animal Farm. And he doesn't represent the Enlightenment. He doesn't represent life, liberty, and property. He doesn't represent John Locke. He doesn't represent a constitutional republic. Because in a constitutional republic, its very bedrock of philosophy is the Enlightenment. He doesn't represent that at all. You know what he represents? A caliphate. You know what he represents? Communism. You know what he represents? Taking away your property. Now there's a phrase in the United States, don't tread on me.
History, every time you have someone like this who's in power, it never changes. The end result is the same. Everyone's okay with it as long as they think it's someone else's money who's going to take care of them. It always comes down to the entire population who has to cover these expenses. And people are just naive.
Of course they're going to move out.
All this stuff has been tried in cities and states, and we know what works and what doesn't work. We have the internet. What's even more staggering is that Democrats have access.
You have the internet and you have grok. No country has done well in communism. None. The people don't have freedoms, and top-down control of an economy leads to eventual stagnation. Now, people would say, well, what about the rise of China? They're communists. They're a one-party system. They seem to be doing really well. Really? What about all the ghost cities? What about all the municipalities that are going bankrupt in China? Ever pay attention to that?
All this data, and they still run on these policies, and they're either just as stupid or count on the stupidity of the electorate, because over 51% of these states keep putting them back in charge.
So in New York, if you have a home worth $750,000 or more, it's on the chopping block. And what nobody's talking about is New York City is going to experience the largest wealth grab in American history. And this is happening in the capital of capitalism.
Now, think about that. We have an over $5 billion gap in the budget in New York City. And look at all that money that went to illegal aliens. And now they're going to take the estate of little old ladies in the Upper East Side. But it must be the Jews' fault, right? Yeah, it must be the Jews' fault. You know, here's the problem. Here, America needs to fucking wake up. We are under attack. And we're under attack between Western civilization and its values and Islamic civilization and its values. And Islamic civilization and its values are not in line with our constitutional republic. And it's sure as hell not in line with the Enlightenment. No, but you got to demonize the Freemasons too. You got to demonize the Jews and the Freemasons. Yet the Freemasons is what's booted up the United States. I mean, like, everything about it is America, but you got to demonize them. You know, all these conspiracy theorists out there, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't even know their history. George Washington was a Freemason. But yet the Freemasons are controlling the whole world, and your life sucks because of the Freemasons. Really? Maybe there's a backstop of making sure that a caliphate doesn't happen in the United States. You ever thought of that?
Has now fallen to the mob, as every day it seems like lawlessness makes another advance with zero resistance, as we're now seeing demonstrations in support of Iran's evil regime and their Ayatollah who's promised to wipe out America, while our leaders talk endlessly about defunding heroic police officers at a time when we need them the most. And if you want people to leave New York, make it as expensive as possible to live here while making it as dangerous as possible, and people are going to leave on their own. Don't you worry. At least the folks who've got a problem with those things aren't going to put up with it. They're the ones that are going to leave, and perhaps that's the real plan. A plan to purge New York of everyone who's got an issue with radical behavior.
Now, anyone that read Animal Farm or watched the movies, guess what? What did Napoleon the Pig do? He wanted to kick out the farmers, the ones that produce, and then take over the farm. And then the farm started collapsing. What about Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand? Same thing. It's the same, basically the same story. Socialism comes in, people that produce leave, and society collapses. Still think that you're going to get a blessing 9/11, 2026? The probability is really low.
Dangerous regimes and criminal activities so that it can be completely taken over and remade in a new, comforting, collectivist image. And that brings us to the real reason many people say New York City is gonna be transformed forever over the next few months. Once you destroy your law-abiding and get rid of them, they're never coming back. Which is why some say...
No, I disagree with Cash Jordan here, all right? There'll be destruction. We'll probably go back to the 1970s or 1980 hellhole of New York City, but there will be a moment in time, years later, maybe decades later, that someone rises up and says, enough is enough, and cleans it up, and it goes back on the ascent. But it's definitely in the decline. Now, I personally have witnessed New York City's decline. It started the last 2 years of Bloomberg's last term as mayor and accelerated with de Blasio. But hey, New York wants to be just like London. And if we keep on going down this road, we're going to wake up and we're not going to hear beep, beep, and bus sounds down the street and taxi cab drivers getting all pissed off and screaming, outside their window. No, we're not going to hear that. We're going to hear the call for prayer by some imam in New York 5 times a day. Thank you, Mondani. But blame the Jews. Blame the Jews. Yeah.
Hard on his desire for maximum property taxes and wealth taxes, as it's pretty easy for someone who works from a computer to ditch their rental apartment, pack their bags, and leave, but it's virtually impossible for someone who spent a lifetime building their American dream and becoming a property owner or starting a business to sell everything and walk away. Which means either way, you win if it's your goal to get rid of those folks and totally change this place permanently. But as you're about to see, even these plans are not radical enough for all of New York's voters.
That constantly reaffirm Israel's right to exist, because people like me are constantly attacked by politicians for standing up for Palestine, and you are constantly defending the right for Israel to exist. My family is in Palestine right now, constantly under attack, and I'm hearing you say free Palestine, but also Israel has the right to exist. Don't be hypocritical.
And these are the folks that have free reign on the city's streets.
We proclaim
this idea of natives is not consistent with human history. Land ownership, countries are in the crucible of war. All right? And if you can't hold the land, you don't deserve it. It's that simple. The United States doesn't deserve the rights of, the continental space between the Atlantic and the Pacific. We earn it. And how do we earn it? We protect it from foreign invaders. Now, people would say, well, there was a lot of atrocities with, Europeans and the American Indian. The American Indian was warring with each other. Fact. And secondly, they weren't as technologically prowess to be able to maintain the land as the Europeans. They lost on the battlefield. If the Palestinians lose in the battlefield, tough shit. And that also includes if the Israelis lose on the battlefield. Because guess what? There was something called the diaspora for the Jews. And that's exactly what happened. The Jews couldn't hold the land and lost it. And it just so happened that, thousands of years later, they come back and they're fighting and they're holding the land. So stop whining about colonialism and all this bullshit. If you can't hold the land, if you can't control your own currency, you don't deserve it, a country. It's about earning it.
Support for the Islamic Republic. Shame, shame, USA.
So shame, USA? Why doesn't the Palestinians fight and hold the land? It doesn't look like they can. And remember, the Jews, it happened to the Jews 2,000 years ago. They lost. They were kicked out. Rome took over. This is what I mean, that the curse is coming. It's coming. People pay attention. It's coming.
USA!
That's so crazy that people would be on the streets of New York supporting a dictator whose values go against everything they say they stand for just because they've got a bigger problem with the president of our country. And these are the same folks.
Or they have a problem with the president of our country, and they have a problem with who's aligning with the president, which is Netanyahu and the IDF. And if our politic started to align with the protesters, these Palestinian protesters or these Iranian protesters, it would only metastasize and to try to pull down the constitutional republic that we have. This is the very nature of the idea of a caliphate. And so these people that are complaining about colonialism, Western colonialism, they're not paying attention that it is in the DNA of the Quran, colonialism. What do you think a caliphate is? It's colonializing. It's taking over a region and converting individuals into the Muslim faith, the Islamic faith, and it's pushing out others. Now, if they, because of just the dynamics of human beings, independent of the religion, if they're successful at that, then they earn the land. I have a problem with it because I am more aligned with Western culture, not Middle Eastern culture. All right. So a caliphate is a existential threat to a constitutional republic. It is a existential threat to the Enlightenment. It is an existential threat to our way of life, our democracy. Do you think this is not going to metastasize? Then if people think that this won't metastasize, if you don't push back and it won't metastasize, this is not going to get worse and metastasize in the nation, then take a look at what's happening in Michigan. Look at what's happening in Hamtramck. Look at what's happening in Dearborn. Wake up. Wake up. And then there's videos out there that where you have citizens, they're paying taxes, going to a city council meeting, and the mayor of Dearborn is telling the citizens to move out if they don't like the Islam. That he's in control. Americans need to wake up or they're going to get cursed. The Brits seem like they're still sleeping. And yet their country is being taken over. Look at it. What is an Englishman now? What about the culture of the English? No, that's being all taken over because of stupid ultra-liberal policies of multiculturalism and relativism and postmodernism. But just blame the Jews. It must be the Jews' fault. Really?
And freebies courtesy of the mayor, like frozen rent in grocery stores where everything, you just take it, it's yours, someone else paid. But nobody's talking about how the mayor's plans to create all of this free stuff is actually going to require everyone's money, whether or not they're a millionaire, and even whether or not they own property.
Mayor Mamdani just proposed the utility hike on every New Yorker.
Oh, yeah?
Except he didn't call it that. He called it a 9.5% property tax increase. Before you call me dramatic, hear me out. Utility companies like
This was already written in Animal Farm. Too bad America can't read.
Listen, and National Grid pay property taxes on their infrastructure right here in New York City. And under New York's rate-making system, those costs are passed directly through to the customers. Former Public Service Commission Chair John Howard said it best, quote, "You're not taxing Con Edison, you're taxing customers." Right now, roughly 25 to 30% of the delivery portion of your bill is taxes. And electric and gas bills are already scheduled to rise, about 10% for electric and nearly 16% for gas.
This is a very similar problem in California, not just New York City. CNN is quoting the gasoline price at the pump in California. They're not giving you the little detail that the elevated price in California is heavily because of the taxes that are in California on gasoline. Oh, they don't want to tell you that socialism takes money away from you. See, socialism takes away your property through taxation, through other means, but they're taking away your property. So they are antithetical to John Locke. They're antithetical to the Enlightenment. They're antithetical to the bedrock of our constitutional republic. Because remember, the constitutional republic guarantees property rights. A democracy in its purest form does not. It's mob rule. No, that's not what the Democrats want. The Democrats want top-down government. The Democrats want to say, well, wait a minute here. We need to have social programs for the illegals, so let's take away your property.
Years, adding roughly $600 more, wait for it, per household annually by 2028. I'll layer a 9.5% property tax increase on top of that. Those taxes don't disappear. They show up on your bill. Property taxes are one of the largest.
Wow. So, your utility bills. Everybody here that wants to have the lights on is now going to be paying for all the free stuff that everybody here voted for. What a shocker that people voted for communism and then it shows up and it's going to take what it needs from everybody. And it's going to take more than what it needs because
and here is the you want to hear the crazy part of this? After my diatribe, I don't blame the Jews. All right? Want to hear the crazy part about this? most people that voted for Mondani in New York during the election are young, can't find jobs. I don't know why they're in New York. It's as if they think that they get a degree and they automatically deserve a job in New York City, so they shouldn't even be moving here. So they can't find jobs, so they get all pissed off and they're looking for a socialist to help them out. And there's also the non-observant Jew that's ultra-liberal that push this bullcrap too. So really, the issue isn't blaming the Jew. It's really blaming a mindset. And that is when you have a group of people that's not tied into God, country, and family, you have problems in a society. It starts to devolve. So when you have less religion observance, especially in Judaism, when you have less affinity to your country, when you have less affinity for family creation and just pushing for killing fetuses, don't be surprised that you get a curse. And that was the type of person that voted for Mondani. They wanted to kill fetuses. They didn't care about the country. They want to demonize the United States and say it's some sort of colonial power and is apologetic for everything. And they're not observant. Where do you think our morality comes from? The core of the morality. It's religion. Well, when you get rid of that, when you just live in a postmodern, anything goes society, don't be surprised that theft becomes commonplace. Don't be surprised that murder becomes commonplace.
Resources to provide unlimited freebies, and that's why none of this stuff ever works.
You chase all the people out there paying taxes so that the government can find ways to make maybe subsidized daycare to help workers be available and do something productive that helps everything come together. Instead, you stand there and say, well, daycare is 20 grand a year, and even people 300 grand here, they have trouble making it, and you want to take half of it. Right?
Can we actually?
That's what's so crazy about all of this. The people complaining that they cannot afford to live here, who voted for affordability, are now going to have to pay even more to live in a city that they can't afford. And it's not like you're going to pay some taxes.
That's exactly what happened on Animal Farm, where Squealer the pig and Napoleon the pig ended up running the farm into the ground, and all the other animals started getting pissed off. I'm telling you. It was already written decades ago what was going to happen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please get the probiotics. You can get it in powder form or a VeggieCap form. Both are very high quality. This will improve your gut biome, reduce inflammation, improve your immune system at the gut level. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll have better memory, better clarity. You'll detoxify your central nervous system by having better sleep. Also, your metabolism will improve. So please go to my store and get the probiotics. Your skin will also improve over time. So good gut health leads to overall good health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Immediate recipient of 100% of the value that you put into the system. No, you're going to get taxed if you live here to pay for free daycare that other people go to, and not everybody that gets to go to that free daycare is going to be putting in the same amount that you are. This is Communism 101, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And you know something? The rich, they can survive this. The folks who can't are the folks in the middle who are
I'm pretty
trapped.
sure that phrase that he just said came right out of Animal Farm. And you know the problem with Marxism? And a lot of people don't pay attention. Karl Marx came from a wealthy family. He was an intellectual lazy fuck that thought that the intelligentsia should tell how society should run. It was a top-down structure. And what he used was some of the inequalities that are produced in a capitalistic society, he demonized to try to gain notoriety within his economic theory. The reality of the situation is it's about merit. You got to work hard and there's no guarantee. But the moment you start giving away things and guaranteeing stuff, the society will collapse. And you're seeing it in real time in New York City. And some people would say, oh, so what? It's just New York. You know, someone else is living in a different area of the United States. Hello. The heart of America is New York City. All right? And if the heart isn't healthy, don't be surprised that America has a fucking heart attack.
And that would be the middle class.
Give the exact stats, Rob. I just sent you this tweet if you want to pull that up. This is very important for all of us. It is. This is very important to see the details of
look at this.
Mondani has proposed lowering the exemption on death taxes, estate tax, from 7.1 million down to 750.
Wow. Everyone who owns a
He
home.
also increased the death tax from 16% to 50%.
That's crazy.
in his city.
Wow.
Now think about it. You die, your estate's going to be taxed 50% now, based on his proposal. They could take away half of your wealth. And what are they going to do with it? Bolster up the MTA pension? Bolster up the NYPD pension? Keep the garbage blowing in the street? What are they going to do with all that money? They're wasting it. They're wasting it.
No other jurisdiction in the U.S. confiscates wealth at death from people with that small state, small of an estate. Anyone with any equity in a home New York City would likely exceed the 750 and have to pay the death tax. There is a federal estate tax.
So the reason that this doesn't happen anywhere is because everywhere else in this country, people believe that owning personal property is not wrong. If you believe full on in communism, the idea of personal property doesn't exist for you. Nobody should have personal property. Nobody should have a home. Nobody should have anything. That's why to the communists, a 50% wealth.
And it's antithetical to the very foundation of our Constitution, because we are built on the theoretical framework of the Enlightenment. Mondani and our Constitution are incompatible.
Tax, I mean, they're still letting you keep 50%. They're supposed to take 100%. They're being generous. They're not going hard enough with these proposals right here. And this is going to freak people out. It already is freaking people out.
Translate it for people. Your mom is a widow. Your dad's been gone for a while. God rest his soul. And your mom passes away. You find out her home in New York is worth $770. Your sister is married with a child, and you say, wouldn't it be great if my sister could move into mom's house because it's all paid for? Yeah, but now someone in the family's got to come up with $350,000 minimum to give to the city of New York.
To keep a piece of property they already own. Again, you got to remember, if owning the property is wrong, these sorts of taxes.
This is why it's so important that if you're older, if you're paying attention right now and you're older, all right, 70 years old, maybe even 65, you need to start transferring ownership to your kids now. So you're not clipped by this bullshit. Also, a lot of people don't realize, if you go into a nursing home and you have property, eventually the nursing home will own the property. So pay attention to that. It's better to transfer ownership of your property to your kids through a trust or direct ownership or whatever. Talk to an attorney for your particular situation for the best move. But do not own stuff when you get closer to your demise, right? Now, some people would say, well, they don't have anyone to transfer it, then that's a different situation. But do not hold property because the government's going to take it. Do not hold property. It's better to transfer the ownership to your kids. Somehow, either through a trust or direct ownership or whatever. But what most people do is, I can't trust my kid, I can't trust this, I can't trust that, and therefore I'm just going to hold on to it. Well, let's say you have a cardiac arrest and you have to be living in a nursing home, or let's say you have a stroke or whatever, you fall down and break your hip and you can't move around anymore, and you're in a nursing home. Eventually, the nursing home is going to take your Social Security. It's going to take your home, all of your wealth. If you didn't transfer the property before you start going in a permanent status in the nursing home. How it normally works is that you're paying per month, and it's very high. It's usually $5,000 to $7,000 or more a month in nursing homes. And that bleeds down your account. And it gets to the point where you have to transfer your Social Security to the nursing home. And if you have property, the property will be sold and the proceeds of that property will go to the nursing home. A lot of people don't understand this. When you're older, you're in those golden years, let's say you're in, 70 years old and your life expectancy is 75 or 80, better start transferring your property. Don't be stupid. Because what do you want? Do you want the government to own it? Or would you rather pass it on to your family to build generational wealth? This is the problem with the middle class and the poor in the United States. They don't think generationally. So what people have done is demonize the Rothschilds. It's a rich Jewish family. It's probably maybe the richest family ever in human history. Maybe. Who knows? But very rich. Started very poor. Like super poor. Poorer than you could ever imagine. But they became super wealthy. But a lot of people demonize them. They look at all that wealth and they just demonize them. They got so much power and all this. They thought generationally. People with old money think generationally. People that are stupid, people that are middle class, people that are self-centered think only in their lifetime. Not 2 lifetimes down the road. Now people would say, well, why should I care? I'm not going to be around. Yeah, but just imagine if someone 2 generations before you thought that way. And they thought generationally. Then you'd be better off. This is a big issue in the United States in the middle class. They don't think generationally. But they'll demonize the ones that do. Most people don't have a launching pad when they're born because the grandmother or the the grandfather or even the parents didn't think far enough afield to create the launching pad for their kids. It always takes a individual within the family usually male, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, that is the standing bearer for the house of, to build the house of. And the reason why people demonize the Rothschilds is because they're jealous. That's why. Because people in their family history didn't think generationally.
But if owning property is a good thing, they make 0 sense, and that's what's got people really frightened. And here's the problem. If you're middle class and you own something, and for the last 20 years, you've been banking on the idea of owning that home and having it be your provision during retirement, that's now gone, and there's no plan for you to get it back if the government goes through with this stuff. And just because this hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that even if it fails in a few months, that it's not going to come back on the table year after year after year until it goes through. The middle class here is in a lot of trouble. They are being exploited, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Like all the people that were glazing over this guy, that Andrew Schultz, how would they feel like? Because I remember the podcast where Andrew and all of them were all excited and he's there, and they're like, "I'll pay the extra percent. I'll pay that." Now it's going up. It was 1, now it's 2, now it's going to 3. Now he wants your money when you die, which that $750 should be going to your kid. He's a horrible job at cleaning up the city.
You know something? You got to give the mayor here a lot of credit. He made communism cool enough to ride that platform to election in the capital of capitalism, New York. Here's an article and some photos of him being on this podcast that was just mentioned. They're talking about how cool capitalism isn't and how cool socialism is. And you know what? People believe this. And it sounds great when you put a nice articulate smile on it until you realize that the taxes that are associated with all these freebies have to come from everybody. And of course, spending less money isn't part of the equation here to get what we need for the things that are most important. Because the way communism works is it never has to do with less. Communism doesn't cut one program to fund another. Instead, you are the one who's going to fund that new program, even if you're already funding all of the other programs. Programs which are now going to cost people their paychecks, and then they're just going to need more freebies, creating an endless snowball of socialism that never stops until there's nothing left, which reveals the dirty little secret of communism. Because these endless snowballs, they force people out. That's why every communist regime in world history has only been able to survive if it's been able to close its borders and lock everybody in and stop them from running away so that it can take everything they have for longer until there's still eventually nothing left.
We'll take anybody. Okay, show me one thing right that he's doing. Every week he's coming in front of the camera going, "Hey, you know what? I need more money from you rich people. And I just want to know if you guys are cool with it." All the rich people that were, now what are you doing?
There's buyers from Warsaw a week ago. We covered the clip for all the people with the megaphone were saying, "Hey, I own a house here, and I think they're in Brooklyn. We own homes here in Brooklyn. He was going to do this. Now he's taxing us."
All the homeowners.
The guy that was at the microphone was a...
The reason this happened is because when you talk about affordability, that is something that every single person can identify with. Because when you go to the grocery store in this city and you see that there's $10 milk, nobody can afford that. When people start talking about how that's unaffordable, that is going to resonate. You know what also resonates with every single person? Taxing someone who makes more money than them. Because if you don't have enough, it's easy to look at your situation and say, you know what? Things are tough for me. If I were doing better, it would be easier, but I'm not. Therefore, somebody who's doing better and has it easier, they should be making up the slack. But the problem is the way communism works is you might be here, somebody else might be here, but there's other folks who are going to need your money as well in a communist system.
Because they seem like New York. I'm not hearing nothing from the New Yorkers.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing nothing. This is the only video that I saw of the buyer's remorse. This guy.
Right.
That was the dude.
Speech in every debate where you engage, we open up.
First of all, that guy that was the angry patriot, he's assuming all New Yorkers voted for Mondani. That's not true. I voted for Cuomo. All right? I didn't want Mondani. I didn't want Cuomo either. But I sure as hell didn't want communism. So not all New Yorkers voted for Mondani. The problem is that Mondani was able to get enough New Yorkers to vote for him. And unfortunately, affordability is a major problem in New York. So the problems that people are complaining about pre-voting for Mamdani are still true today. Affordability is a major issue. But the thing is that the young, the ultra-liberal, they will not listen and pay attention to history until it bites them in the ass. And what they did by voting in Mamdani has made affordability worse, not better. So the chances of Mamdani being able to survive this, the next go around, is low probability. But there's another added thing that is important to understand. As New York is failing under Mamdani, it warns the rest of the country, beware of people like him in the general election. Beware of the AOCs. Beware of, the squad. Beware of this ultra-liberalism. So maybe America will learn and be a little bit more careful on who they vote for.
Now today, accept the words echoing from us now. Do your job as mayor and leave our taxes out.
You know what the thing here is? We were told about the property tax increase. People that own homes rightly came out and realized this was going to directly affect them. But people don't know about the stealth aspect of this tax, which is going to hit every utility bill in town, and then it's going to cause utilities to go up. People's bills are going to go up. They're going to complain, again, about affordability. They're going to say, oh, my
It's not just the utilities. It's going to be everything. Everything. Because you have landlords that have to make up the tax. So businesses that are, renting space, grocery stores, everything in New York is going to go up. And it's going to go up more than 9.5%. And it will become sticky. These higher prices will become sticky and become more permanent, less elastic. But this was warned. Ayn Rand said this. George Orwell said this.
My rent stabilized apartment, which has frozen rent. This is unfair. My rent's frozen. I got the free grocery store, but I still can't live here because the bills keep going up for the utilities. And then what's going to happen? We're going to need even new taxes, you see, to offset these affordability increases, which is just going to jack up the cost to live here more and more. That's what people don't understand. Every single tax that you hit a society with, whether it's the rich, or the middle class, or whoever, it cannibalizes the whole thing. And that's because people don't understand how communism works. That's why they voted for it. Now they're learning how it works. And they're very afraid of what this is going to mean. If you own a home, like these folks that own a home and now might have it hit with a very high property tax or a potential estate tax, well, what does that mean? That means that once this goes through, or if it goes through, whether it's this year or next year or in 3 years, if this happens and the government's going to take half the value of your home, keeping your home means you walk away with 50%. That means if somebody comes along and offers you 55% of the value for your home and the government's going to take half, you're better off selling at a rock bottom price just to get rid of your ass. And then that person who buys it, well, then they're going to have to sell it at a rock bottom price later. So this may not be sustainable, but in the short term, you're going to see people who are forced to sell their homes, which have a value that is pretty well taxed. That value is going to get cut way down, and eventually property values here could go to zero. This entire thing could implode upon itself. This is alarming.
But what do millionaires get in your state other than demonized? It's not patriotic to stay in New York. It's idiotic. What businessman is going to go down to Florida and play golf with their buddies And to imagine that, like after a round of go, hey, successful business owners, do I got a deal for you? Move your business back to the place you just left, pay more taxes. The cost of living is 50% higher. Yeah, hard pass from anybody with half a brain.
Right. What he's talking about here is the inability of a place that chases out folks to get them back. It's impossible for New York to convince people who left to move back after they decide that, you know what, enough is enough. Because they're going to go somewhere else. It's going to be better, and it's going to be more predictable. If you're going to try and stay in a place where there's mobs on the street who are promoting despotic regimes, clamoring for more of other people's money, the writing is already on the wall. If it's not this year, it's next year. If it's not next year, it's the year after. All these taxes are going to hit because that's what the voters here want. And that is the prediction that you have to make. You can't look at a place like New York and say, you know what? If I stay here and other people leave, I'm going to eventually be able to survive this because eventually people here will learn and bring in somebody who wants to fix all that stuff. That's not how this works. As people leave, the electorate radicalizes itself, and a higher percentage of people who remain are now in favor of all the things that force people out. If you have a very close election and somebody comes in and they go hard on communism, like what the mayor is doing, that is going to essentially guarantee majorities of people who stick around because they're the only ones left and want to vote for this stuff in the future. We're going to have communism here forever now.
You want companies to come back? You're going to have to incentivize them. Just throwing this out there, too. You just lower taxes. I don't know, maybe. Look, here are the top 4 states that people are leaving: California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey. All Democrat states. With the number one reason people are leaving is because of taxes. And yet, these liberals keep raising them. And where are they going? Texas, Tennessee, and Florida.
Because that's what the voters there want. As people leave states like California, New York, and Illinois, who stays? The people that were voting in the politicians that offered them the freebies, the people who voted in the politicians that said they were going to tax the rich. That's who stays. So in order to maintain their political power, the leaders of these places have to keep going hard on something that's forcing people out. And this idea of people leaving, I mean, this happens over decades. It doesn't happen immediately. Yes, there are people who will leave New York City in the near future, but people have already been leaving. That's why we have these budget deficits. That's why we have a radicalized electorate, because the people that were around 20 years ago to vote for a Giuliani-like mayor, well, they've long since left. That's why we're not going to have a mayor like that again.
States with limited government, maximum freedom, and less taxes. This is not hard. Yet some of the states with these liberal states are the largest states with bachelor's degrees in them nationwide.
Yeah.
And they can't figure out why people are leaving. I mean, it would be a stand-up routine. But it doesn't stop at the state level. Bernie Sanders, he wants to make this nationwide. He's been trying to do this for like all 50 years he's been in office. But it was for millionaires and billionaires, but once he became a millionaire, he wants to only do it for billionaires now. The fundamental difference between actual Republicans and liberals is liberals believe the money that you take home is what the government allows you to keep.
There it is, right there. That is the primary tenet of communism, is that you don't deserve to own anything. You don't deserve to have personal property. You don't deserve to have a business.
These people don't believe in the Enlightenment. They don't believe in life, liberty, and property rights. That's a big problem because our Constitution does. Communism is a cancer, just like a caliphate is a cancer. And it so happens that you have a communist mayor, a Muslim mayor, destroying New York City. And I don't think that's by accident.
Deserve to have a home. You don't deserve to have wealth. And your children who didn't work for your wealth do not deserve to inherit it. To them, that is the most unfair thing ever, this idea of generational wealth. And that's why we've got these ideas of wealth taxes. That's why we've got people who are living in a middle-class home and are about to see it disappear, and about to see the values of their property wiped out because nobody's going to come along and buy a home in New York, knowing that in just a couple of years, the value of that home could be worthless because laws and wealth taxes are passed to make it worthless. And you want to know why people still vote for this stuff? Because if folks in California, New York, or Illinois were to say, you know what, we need to stop giving away all the freebies. We need to let people work hard for their own money, and if somebody works hard for something, we're going to allow them to keep it. That's unacceptable to people who've been voting for socialism over and over and over again and think it's the way that the world is supposed to work and think that that is what's going to lift people out of poverty. What do you think about all this? I will see you in the next video.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the products that I offer, stack them the way I'm telling you to improve your health and wellness. And this will help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex. This is super important. If you're 40 years of age or older, this will help to boost up your energy levels, rev up your metabolism, and protect your neurons. Omega-3 helps with your cardiovascular health. You should be taking this every day. This will help to bring down inflammation and improve your lipid profile. Myotrol, if you're 40 years of age or older, do some resistance training and take the Myotrol. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle. So this will help to reduce the atrophy that takes place when you get older. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you will also benefit from taking Myotrol because it will help you to recover after your workout and help you to build muscle. And get the structural nano silver drops and lozenges. You can get it in cherry flavor, honey and lemon, and blueberry, and orange splash, vitamin C, honey and lemon lozenges. Get a few bags for your household. The moment you have that throat irritation, take it right away. It will neutralize and help the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx. Super important. All right, as we continue here, society is in a danger zone. It really is. And it's unfortunate that people aren't waking up. All right, this is The Economist. They were interviewing a former head of MI6. Iran has the upper hand in the war, so let's listen into that clip.
I feel the war is at this really important juncture. President Trump is trying to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by military means, through threats against Iranian power plants, and to seek to end the war through diplomatic talks. I think what people are struggling with, what I'm struggling with, is a full understanding of who has the upper hand right now, who's in a stronger position as that process unfolds.
Iran. I think, and I regret having come to this conclusion because, like many MI6 officers of my generation, we faced the violence and brutality of the IRGC for most of our careers.
That's the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps.
Yeah. So there is no love lost between us. And I shed no tears for Ali Khamenei, who was killed at the beginning of this war. But the reality is that the US underestimated the task. And I think, as of about 2 weeks ago, lost the initiative to Iran. In practice, the Iranian regime has been more resilient than I think anyone would have expected. They took some good decisions, actually, as early as last June, about dispersing their military capability and delegating the authority for the use of those weapons, which has given them significant extra resilience against this incredibly powerful air campaign. They have embarked on what's technically called horizontal escalation, i.e. firing rockets at anybody within range, which at the time, obviously, Shoshenko I thought was nuts, but in fact has been a very good way of putting in direct price on the US. It sort of worked. And then they've understood the significance of the energy war and held the straits of threat and globalized, and essentially not internationalized, just globalized the conflict in a way that gives them some weapons. So they played a weak hand pretty well. And at the same time, my second point is that Donald Trump has said some stuff that will have confirmed something they knew already, which is that they're in a civilizational war in their terms. They're in a war of existence. Donald Trump made it very clear that he wanted to see them, up against the wall, basically. Whereas America has embarked on a war of choice. And in those terms, I think that's imbued them with more staying power than their US and certainly US counterparts. And they know that now. And I think that really is giving them the whip hand. And then finally, there's a very technical point which you'll be as expert or more expert on than I am, which is about stocks of drones and the reality, as I understand it, that whilst this has been an almost perfectly executed military campaign from the air, you can't reduce the threat to zero. And while you can't reduce the threat to zero, Iran can hold the Straits at threat, even with just 10% of its initial drone stocks. It can hold the Straits at threat because these are not military people. This is not a military audience you have to satisfy. This is people who own oil tankers and captains of oil tankers. And that really does give them the whip hand. So I think the options for the USR and Israel are pretty limited and not great.
That really brings us to the question of the regime, which is in place, weakened, but still the Islamic Republic stands as a revolutionary entity, the Revolutionary Guard, the organization that planted roadside bombs that killed many of your colleagues over those years. That stands and is surviving. So to start with, have they been more resilient than you thought? How do you understand their survival and their endurance now?
I think that they are in the death throes. And but I think the irony is that the biggest threat to them is peace, not war. The January uprising showed that they have no answers. The hatred that engendered is endemic and will last for decades. The estimates are up to 10,000 of their own citizens machine gunned in the street by IRGC-sponsored militias. I don't expect them to survive into the long term as a result. But of course, ironically, this situation is an environment where they get an extra lease of life because it's hard for opposition to organise in the face of an air campaign, and they're licensed to be even more brutal than they were before. I think when it comes to the nuclear stuff, the very large majority of Iran, perhaps 80% of them, are against. In fact, they've had it with the theocratic regime, and that actually was sort of how the voting went when Masoud Pezeshkian was elected. So this is data from
President of Iran,
and it wasn't a manipulated election. It showed that pretty well 80% of Iran wants nothing more to do with this sort of total resistance theocratic ideology, but the 20% or probably even less, 10% are the ones with the guns. And that is proving decisive. They are empowered by this situation to continue to brutalise the population.
You've got this interesting attrition that's taken place at the top of the regime and new faces coming through. Some of them, though, probably quite well known to you, the new IRGC Chief General Vahidi. He's a former Quds Force commander. The Quds Force was, of course, very active in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you would have seen them up close. You've got, of course, Ali Larijani killed last week in an airstrike, but people like Saeed Jalili and other figures who were long, at the top of this regime, still there. Many of the people you'd have been studying closely, SSIS chief, I'm sure, have died in the last 2 weeks. There's been huge turnover. What do you make of the kind of ideological complexion of the regime as it has changed in these last 4 weeks?
I think the net effect, which was probably going to happen anyway, is that that we've seen the end of the theocracy. Actually, with the end of Ali Khamenei, his successor was never going to be as powerful as he was. That's kind of it. And in Mushtaba, although he's ostensibly a cleric, he doesn't have his father's credentials. You basically see an IRGC takeover. Not a dictatorship so much as a junta, I would say. And that's how Iran is being run now. So, in paraphrase, the beards have got shorter.
Tell me a bit more about the IRGC, because the regime's revolutionary guard, in a way, a bit like the PLA, they're the armed force that guards the revolution, not the state. That's the regular army, which is disempowered, not very influential. But how religious is it? How ideological are they? Because they also have big business interests, don't they? They're corrupt. They're sort of smuggling things across borders. What are these? Who are these?
Yeah, they're no less ruthless than Ali Khamenei, but they are more corrupt and significant beneficiaries of the sanctions regime. So they're sort of invested in this black economy that's been created by the long-standing sanctions, which is one of the reasons why you might think they would be more pragmatic in these circumstances. It's important to understand Mujtaba as just a sort of, well, we've never even seen him. He's just a figurehead to all of this. So these guys are in charge. None of them, as you say, have any sort of track record that might imply leanings toward reform, but they are, I think, more pragmatic. That's certainly true.
You say the regime is in its death throes. Now, that process, it could be terminal, but that process could last a long time for Iran. What follows? I mean, you're not a mind reader, but what are the prospects you would put on a democratic transition versus some other kind of rather messy and unpleasant transition?
Yeah, I actually think in some ways this war, as I've said, may sustain their capacity to brutalize the regime. But I particularly think after what happened in January, the chances of them keeping the show on the road indefinitely are low. Look, what comes next, who knows? All I can counsel is just sort of listen to the dialogue, in particular, any sort of buyer's remorse around the Mujtaba appointments when they could have put in someone like Ayatollah Khomeini's son, who is a much more pragmatic person but has real religious credentials. That would have been another way to go. That, in fact, would have augured some kind of shift. Masoud Pezeshkian, listen to him, fundamentally a secular reformist figure, but clearly really under the thumb of the IRGC at the moment. If he starts speaking more freely, then you have the prospect of the 80% of Iran that is actually just sort of had enough of this starting to prevail, not just demographically, but electorally. Maybe that would be a clue that I would be listening to.
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take this stack to help with your brain health. Good Night Formula will help you to get into 3 cycles to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Really important. You have good sleep regularly, you slow down the aging process and improve your brain function. A lot of people don't realize if you have sleep deprivation chronically, your hippocampus actually shrinks, right? That's really bad. Get Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor is a great neurostack to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate, and over time what will happen is that you're going to be able to think faster, have better memory, your dendritic connections will increase. So please go to my store, get the Clarity Factor, stack it with the Good Night Formula. You take the Good Night Formula at night, take the Clarity Factor when you wake up or in the afternoon, depending on what your tasks are for the day. But take them every day and improve that brain function. Olive leaf extract, dual purpose. This is going to bring down inflammation, help to control your lipid profile. This helps with your cardiovascular health and your immune system. And resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, gets rid of cells that are in senescence, helps to soak up free radicals, improve your energy levels and the health of your mitochondria, and improve your basal layer for your skin. This is the reason why taking resveratrol makes you look younger, right? Now, resveratrol stacks really well with C60, so please take them together. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen into CNBC. They're talking about SpaceX and the IPO.
It could try to raise more than $75 billion and puts its valuation north of $1.75 trillion, which would be the largest public debut in history. There could be a deal in the Senate on limiting the cost of insulin. Semaphore reports today that a bipartisan group of senators led by Democrat Jeanne Shaheen and Republican Susan Collins has reached a deal to cap the price of a month's supply of insulin at $35. Senators say they've lined up additional support and hope to attach it to legislation at some point this year. And the BBC has a new boss. Former Google executive Matt Britton will become Director General of the British broadcaster. The appointment comes as the BBC faces an uncertain future amid a $10 billion lawsuit from President Trump over a documentary about the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Britain's predecessor, Tim Dick.
Let's listen into. I'm debating Al Jazeera or. Yeah, let's listen to Al Jazeera right now.
The war on Iran is threatening to push food prices even higher across vulnerable nations. The conflict has disrupted fertilizer shipments and sent energy prices soaring. Lebanon's economy was already struggling, and under Israel's recent bombardment, it's set to feel the shock even more. Tony Cheng reports from Beirut.
For Aziza Khalil, a trip to the shops is all about tough decisions. A widow with 3 children, the surge in prices means even the basics are now sometimes out of reach. As she tries to fill her trolley with bargains, she just can't make ends meet.
Example, whatever used to cost 50 now costs 100. What was 200 is now 400. It's unbearable.
This is important to understand that it's not going to be just in the Middle East that food shortages and higher food costs. If the Strait of Hormuz isn't opened up and a de-escalation of the Middle Eastern war, if that doesn't happen, if we don't have a de-escalation, fertilizer shortages and the cost of fertilizer will increase. We're going into the planting season in the United States, mid-April. That means in the fall, the yields potentially could be less. So there may be shortage of food and the cost of food will go up. So this is not just a regional issue. This is a worldwide issue, which I keep on saying, guess what? There's a harvest coming. Now, think about when the harvest season is in the United States. Now, depending on the crop that you grow, some crops can be harvested a couple times a year. So, but let's just do broad brush here. Harvesting takes place in October, September. Didn't I say a curse is coming in the whole world on September 11th of 2026? Don't be surprised that there's going to be food increase. The cost for food will increase. Now, if there's a de-escalation and fertilizer can be provided at the right time for planting, then we may be okay in the fall.
It explains.
The war in the Middle East has sent shockwaves right across Asia, from India to Indonesia. Now, the conflict poses a major challenge for the continent as the world's biggest consumer of Middle East crude oil. And it's all because of what's happening here in the world's most important energy corridor, the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly about 20% of global oil and gas supplies produced in the region pass through this strait. Now, Iran has effectively shut it since the start of the war, blocking shipments, most of which are meant for Asia. Also, the attacks on energy sites across the region hasn't helped because it's resulted in halt in production. Now, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh rely heavily on the Gulf for their energy needs. Now, India has invoked emergency measures, and it's also relying on unsanctioned Russian supplies after President Trump allowed it. Now, the oil and gas reserves in Pakistan and Bangladesh are low, and this is the impact. People scrambling to get fuel, and several shops already shut. Now, China is faring better because it's already stockpiled crude before the war began. It's one of the biggest buyers of Iranian oil despite Western sanctions. And Iran has reportedly allowed Chinese vessels to pass through the Strait of Hormuz on the other side to bring in supplies. And Beijing also has another reliable partner, and that's Russia, for its supplies over pipelines over land. Now we have Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan that have introduced energy voucher programs.
There's a northern pipeline between Russia and China, but what is also important is the Arctic Passage, the North Passage, between July and I think it's October. Or is it June and August? I think it's July to October. That passage is open. So goods, including energy, can pass through the Arctic and into China and back and forth because Russia is breaking the ice. They have icebreakers up there during that period of time. So the North Passage is super important for China. It's not just the pipeline in the north between Russia and China. And this is the reason why Trump keeps on saying, guess what, guys? The Arctic is going to be super important, and why Greenland needs to be in the fold with the United States. Also, this is why it's important for Canada to be in the fold with the United States. Because as the tundra starts to melt, as the ice sheet starts to recede, Greenland and Canada are going to be major, important, strategic areas for sea travel.
Tech consumers from rising prices, and for the first time in decades, Seoul has introduced a fuel cap, and Japan is relying on its national reserves to tide over the crisis. Then we have Thailand and Indonesia that have also introduced some measures. Thailand has put a cap on diesel prices for now, and Indonesia says it's offering fuel subsidies. Finally, we have Vietnam and the Philippines that are struggling. Vietnam doesn't have much of oil reserves. It lasts about 20 days. And we have the Philippine president who's declared an energy emergency.
So here, we're in 2026, the year 2026, and in nations in Asia, it's as if they have a 1970s energy crisis. Now, do you understand why it's so important to be energy dominant? No, but people think we should have windmills and solar panels, even though the energy density is poor. But, the liberals know better. Not.
Authorities to prioritize fuel distribution.
In India, frustration is growing over potential fuel shortages. Drivers in some states have been queuing at fuel stations for hours. India imports about 90% of its crude oil, mostly from Gulf states. It's negotiated with Iran to allow its tankers through the Strait of Hormuz after they were stuck there for days. India's also increased purchases from Russia after the US eased sanctions. The government insists that India does have enough petrol. MK View is the founding editor of The Wire. That's an independent online news platform. He explains why India will feel the pinch more than other Asian states.
I'm gonna switch over to CNBC. They're talking about oil prices fall.
Because I think every step of the way we've seen, you've seen destroying a lot of targets in Iran. You've seen a lot of military action. The Iranians are still here. They're still standing. They have certainly been weakened, but the command structure's in place. Leadership is there. They're fighting back, and they still have very, very important targets that they can hit in the Gulf countries. Things that have been hit already, they can hit them again, and they can hit new ones. And I think they realize that's their only leverage, and the market will react to that.
It seemed as if in the first, let's say, 2 weeks of the war, there was a lot of discussion of ultimately
depletion of missile reserves and even drones by Iran. In other words, we had to wait it out until they were spent. Is that no longer something that can be counted on?
It suggests to me that it's not something we can no longer be counted on. I think there's the consensus in the U.S. military at this point seems to be that if it's 1 more week, 2 more weeks, we are eventually going to run out of targets. And that means destroying all of these missiles and drones and all these things that have been so disruptive that we underestimated initially, that suddenly the Iranians aren't going to have anything left. I think there's an overestimation of that. But as the longer time goes by, yes, we're going to reduce those strikes, Mike, but I also think the Iranians have been surprising to the upside, and there are other surprise risks we haven't even seen yet. The Houthis are preparing to re-enter the war. I wouldn't be surprised. We are advising clients, we have a 70% odds that they are going to. And if you recall, the Houthis withstood 52 days of fighting with the United States. Even President Trump had to tip his cap and say, wow, well done. You guys are grittier and more resilient than I thought. So the Iranians, between that and cyber and several other things, I wouldn't count them out, or I wouldn't think that they're on the verge of having no ability to continue to cause trouble in the Gulf.
So what kind of upside are you looking for on the price of oil? We had Jim Paulson on earlier, and he was remarking how even with this supply disruption, which is perhaps the greatest in history, we actually haven't seen oil prices move up that sharply compared to other historical supply shocks.
Well, trade flow signals are already moving. I think departures from the Atlantic Basin are already ticking up. Once you have the Atlantic Basin importers competing with Asia for the same barrels, prices are going to start to move. For us, Sarah, that's maybe 1 to 2 weeks into April. There's going to be an inflection point when we stop seeing arrivals on the water, no new ships following behind them, physical shortages start to show up. So for us, in terms of price, April 1 to 15, what we're telling clients, without any meaningful resumption of flows through the Strait, we find ourselves in $120 to $130 a barrel range, Brent, and it just goes up from there. But it really depends on the next 5 to 7 days. Do we start to see success or not with this next big plunge into military action to reopen the Strait on the part of the Trump administration?
Well, we know you guys you're experts on the energy market. Thank you for talking us through some of those risk possibilities, Scott. Good to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Scott Modell from Rapidan Energy Group.
Up next, the luxury stocks most impacted by the war in the Middle East. That's when Money Movers returns.
All right. Let's listen into. Let's see. This is about the 82nd Airborne. Oh.
Breaking news right now, Fox has just learned that the Pentagon is deploying more troops to the Middle East. It is part of the president's plans, moves to give the U.S. more options as he works now to negotiate with Iran's leaders. One of those options could be sending in ground forces to secure important sites, especially around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, more dramatic new video coming in from Central Command showing U.S. strikes destroying military targets of Iran's regime. Take a look at this. They're also dropping new photos for us of the new A-10 Thunderbolt II in action. Here's Mark Thiessen.
How does this thing end? It ends with no nuclear weapons, no nuclear fissile material, no ballistic missile program, no massacring protesters, right? And so how do you enforce that? You put the regime in a vice grip.
So because of the regime's near total ban on outside media, video from inside Iran is rare. Here's some, though, that shows the aftermath of U.S.-Israeli strikes as they continue to hammer regime targets in Tehran and beyond. Our chief national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin, is in Washington now with the very latest on what's going on. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Aisha. Well, the U.S. is sending about 1,500 additional troops. The commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, Major General Brandon Tegmeyer, along with elements of his headquarters staff, is expected to deploy to the Middle East soon. The 82nd Airborne is your ready force. U.S. officials have indicated ground forces could be used to take Iran's Karg Island or its highly enriched uranium, but publicly signaling these kinds of troop movements and naming the potential targets represents a lapse in operational security and could just be a negotiating tactic.
We see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs.
I said, Pete and General Raisin Kane, I think this thing's going to be settled very soon. Here they go. Oh, that's too bad. Pete didn't want it to be settled. They were not interested in settlement. They were interested in just winning this thing.
The A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft have been used to destroy the countless small Iranian naval vessels they're used to drop mines in the Strait of Hormuz. It takes very little, however, to threaten the strait.
It would be hard to keep it open. And so it is like what we found in Iraq. We could bomb Iraq pretty easily. We could even take Baghdad with relative ease. I tell people about this war, if you like this war, enjoy this first part, because this is the best part. Because everything after this will be harder. They only have to shoot a civilian tanker or cargo vessel, once a week.
Right.
And then people go, well, I don't know what day they're going to strike somebody, so I'm not going to let my ships go now.
General Stan McChrystal fought the insurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan for more than a decade and warns that the Iranians still have the asymmetric advantage. Aisha?
Okay, Jen Griffin live for us. Jen, thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube. And
growing luxury market in the world, growing between 6 and 8% in 2025. That compares to about 3% growth in the U.S. Total sales in the Middle East reached about $20 billion a year. That's about 6% of the global market. Dubai especially has become a magnet for global wealth, accounting for about half of all luxury sales in the entire Middle East. Now, the highest earning stores in the world for many luxury brands are right there in the Dubai Mall. Bernstein analyst Luca Solca saying that sales in the region could fall by more than half in the quarter. That would be a minor hit to overall global luxury growth, but if oil remains high, spending on luxury globally could come under pressure.
Oil prices could prompt a downward adjustment in global stock markets, and that would be very bad because consumer feel good of people with wealth in the stock market would be damaged.
Now, for the full story on what the war could mean for luxury and for wealthy consumers around the world, you can sign up for the new Inside Wealth newsletter out tomorrow morning at cnbc.com/InsideWealth. Mike, Sarah?
Yes, sir. Robert, it's interesting, the final point there, because I was wondering about the knock-on effects. The Asian economies are the ones that, in theory are most exposed to a rise in oil prices, and therefore maybe wealth effects would matter there. And on the other hand, I wonder if the decline in actual core Middle East sales would be more of a temporary, presumably coming back when hostilities end.
Well, you're absolutely right. Investors have keyed in here on the global slowdown potential rather than just the Middle East. Middle East is about $20 billion in annual sales. We've seen a market value decline for all these luxury stocks of nearly $100 billion. So it's far more than even all the annual sales in the Middle East. And the concern is really about Asia. China had been recovering and showing signs of strength until this issue. Now, of course, you've got important markets like Korea, Southeast Asia that are highly dependent on imported oil and will see higher prices and probably an economic slowdown if that lasts. So indeed, Mike, that is the broader concern if it happens.
Yeah, on the other side, higher oil prices are good for a lot of these countries like the UAE, and Qatar that generate a lot of revenue. And it's not a rethink, Robert, right? Is there any reason to think that this is not just temporary and that in the long term this will all come back?
Yeah, there are risks, but the greater opportunity here is if we have a stable Iran, a more stable and peaceful Middle East, then, the main growth engine for luxury in the past year has been the Middle East. That could take off even faster if we have a good result here. So yes, we're seeing the market price in the risk, maybe not pricing in the real opportunities if we have a good outcome in the short term.
100%. Thank you, Robert Frank. Good to see you. When we come back, Meta losing a landmark trial over child safety, what that means for the company and for users moving forward. We'll be right back.
Alrighty. Let's listen into what's going on with shipping. This analyst was an ex-military, ex-Navy guy, so he's an interesting one to listen to about this.
I'm your host, Sal Mercagliano. Welcome to today's episode. So Iran has issued a formal notice to the United Nations announcing that the Strait of Hormuz is not only closed to the United States and Israel, but also to any aggressor nations. Now, we're going to talk about the legality of this and whether or not Iran even has that jurisdiction to do it. But we're also going to talk about what is going on in the Straits over the past day. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the last day on marine traffic, showing you traffic through the Strait. So take note of a couple of things. Number one, red indicates tankers, green are cargo ships. Notice that the vessels are not going through the center of the Strait here. This is where the vessel traffic separation scheme is. This is where vessels would normally go through. Instead, the ships are heading up here, just north of Larik Island, between Larik and Kishim Island. This is within the territorial waters of Iran. And then ships are progressing here along the eastern side of the Strait, also in the territorial waters of Iran. This gives credence to the concept that Iran has worked out deals with these ships to make the passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to talk about what that means and what the significance of it is. Here's the latest report by JITMIC as of 24 March. Situation still critical in the Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, Gulf of Oman. 21 attacks on vessels since 1 March. 6 vessels transited through the Strait of Hormuz within the last 24 hours. Looking at transits through the Strait of Hormuz on 22 March, we see 3 cargo vessels and 1 tanker, and on 23 March, 2 cargo vessels and 4 tankers. So we're beginning to see an increase in the number of ships moving between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. As noted, we haven't seen an attack on any vessels since 23 March. The most recent attack was on a vessel within the Strait of Hormuz, inside the Persian Gulf, off the coast of the UAE. All right, before we jump in that story, I want to take one other look, and this time at marine traffic. This display shows you global traffic around the world. Again, green are cargo ships, red are tankers. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here and take out some of the ships. So we're going to remove all the ships except for crude oil tankers, and then even then we're going to modify it. So we're just looking at ships over 150,000 deadweight tons. So that gives us the fairly large size of crude oil tankers. And here you can see that conduit of oil around the world. This is kind of like the circulatory system of the global energy network. And unfortunately right now, right here at the Strait of Hormuz, we have it kind of pinched. 20%, roughly 20 million barrels per day typically flow through here. There's roughly about 103 million barrels per day that are loaded around the world. With 20 million barrels stuck inside the Persian Gulf per day, we're not getting that flow out. Now we're getting some out. We're getting about 1 million a day, a little bit less than that, coming across on a pipeline here to Fujairah. But this terminal has been under continual attack and has not been able to load up to pressure. Then we have a pipeline that runs here across Saudi Arabia to this massive congregation of vessels off of Yanbu. That pipeline that goes across Saudi Arabia here has roughly a little bit over 1.5 million barrels per day usually, and they're trying to ramp it up right now to about 5 million barrels per day. But what we're seeing is because of that constraint, that 20 million barrels per day, or roughly a quarter of the world's energy sources when you factor in LNG, liquefied petroleum gas, liquefied natural gas, and other energy, This is putting a hard press on the rest of the system. Normally, where tankers were flowing out of the Persian Gulf, now they got to come here out of the Red Sea. That's a bit of a longer voyage, plus ships are taking longer to load, so that's putting a delay on. Tankers that are not loading in this region have to go to other places, so we see tankers heading around Africa. Some are going up here to Nigeria, some are going across to Brazil, some potentially heading up toward Venezuela, but more importantly, they're heading up toward the United States into the Gulf Coast here and loading. This is adding a huge long delay in the ability to get oil across. The longer you have to go, the more ton miles you have to cover, the less capacity is being delivered. For example, if you had a ship that could deliver 4 loads per year, but now because of the elongated distance, it can only load 3, well, you've got to make that up. The problem is we don't have any extra tankers. We're at max capacity. What older tankers we have are in the sanctioned dark fleet, and we're trying to use those. That's why you see the United States removing sanctions on Russian and even Iranian vessels, because what they're trying to do is free up all that oil that's afloat out there. Usually there's a lot of oil that's afloat out there. There's about 100 million barrels, for example, usually sitting off Singapore and Malaysia. But when you add the Russian and Iranian oil, you can add that extra flow. This is why we're seeing very unique trade patterns begin to emerge with the movement of fuel across the ocean. Now, I don't have to demonstrate that to you on a big chart because you're seeing it. When you go to the gas pump right now to fill up your car or your truck, you see exactly that playing out. This is from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration. This shows you the U.S. regular gas prices as of March 23rd, going back a couple of weeks, including to 2 years ago and a year ago. So if you look at gas prices in the United States on March 23rd, $3.96. That's up over 46 cents from just a few weeks ago. And if you go back a year ago, it's up 84.5 cents. Obviously, it's more in different areas, and particularly if you look at the West Coast PAD 5 there, you'll see how high it is, $5.26 a gallon. That is a drop, an increase, of $1.20 a gallon. That has a lot to do with California refineries shutting down and the fact that California uses a special blend of fuel that makes it more expensive. If you look at diesel, you see even more pronounced. Where it was $4.85 a few weeks ago, we're up to $5.37 right now. That's up $1.80 a gallon. If you look at the West Coast, up over $2.07 a gallon. But if you're asking yourself, hey Sal, I thought listen, hey, $14.99 a month for a streaming app, and $9.99 a month for a music app, and $12.99 for a fitness app, But if you're asking yourself, hey Sal, I thought we were energy self-sufficient. Well, yes and no. We produce enough oil for what we need to refine. The problem is all our oil can't be refined in our refineries. So we actually wind up exporting oil we don't need and importing the oil we do need. And since crude oil makes up 51% of the cost of regular gasoline and 41% of diesel, but when you shut off a quarter of the world's oil by closing the Strait of Hormuz and then elongating the freight distances, the ton miles to move oil, that's going to cause domestic oil, WTI, to increase in value and cost. That translates to higher costs at the pumps. All right, that takes us to the story we want to cover here, which is the announcement by Iran to the United Nations. Mike Schuller over G Captain. Iran has indicated to the United Nations that the so-called non-hostile vessels may continue transiting the Strait of Hormuz, but only if they comply with Iranian security requirements and coordinate directly with its authorities, according to an official statement from Tehran to the United Nations. So this is the communique from Iran to the United Nations. I'm just going to read a select portion of it here for you. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as a responsible state firmly committed to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law, has consistently upheld the freedom of navigation and the safety and security of maritime activities. For decades, Iran has actively safeguarded these principles across the region's maritime domains. The effective realization of these principles in practice include passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Following the military aggression of the United States and the Israeli regime against Iran on 28 February, constituting a flagrant violation of Article 2, Section 4 of the Charter of the United Nations, a dangerous and destabilizing situation has been imposed on the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. In the exercise of its inherent right of self-defense, the Islamic Republic of Iran has, in addition to targeting U.S. military bases and facilities in the region, along with some civilians in the region, I might add, taken necessary and proportionate measures to prevent the aggressors and their supporters from exploiting the Strait of Hormuz to advance hostile operations against Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran, in full conformity with established principles and rules of international law, has restricted the passage of vessels belonging to or associated with the aggressors and those participating in the acts of aggression. Concurrently, and in a responsible effort to mitigate risks to vessels and seafarers in the all right, I gotta stop for 1 second here. Iran has been targeting 20 vessels we've talked about. There are at least 8 merchant mariners dead, if not 11. So let's be careful about what we're saying here. Again, I'm just reading what Iran has to say. Iran has implemented a set of precautionary measures aimed at preserving maritime safety and security. Accordingly, as repeatedly emphasized, the Strait of Hormuz remains open. I think that is key. And maritime traffic has not been suspended. Well, it kind of is when you start shooting at vessels, as the case of the tanker you hit like on the first day, the Thai bulker that got hit with 3 crew members killed, the Emirati tug you blew up in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, there's a couple of things here that indicate that maybe the strait isn't quite as open as you say. It goes on, it is further underscored that vessels, equipment, and any assets belonging to the aggressor parties, in this case, the United States and Israel, as well as other participants in the aggression, do not qualify for innocent or non-hostile passage. So when they talk about innocent passage here, that's a very distinct phrase. It comes from Article 19 of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. The UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, ratified in 1982, is the law by which everybody follows when dealing with international trade and movement across the blue water, except for a couple of nations who have not signed, ratified, or done it. So, for example, just for example here, a couple of countries that have not been members to UNCLOS. Iran. Iran signed the convention, but has never ratified the convention. Israel has never signed nor ratified the convention, and I should make note that the United States, while they have signed the convention, have not signed the agreement. So the United States says they do abide by UNCLOS by following it. However, Iran is mentioning UNCLOS, and specifically innocent passage, which is Article 19. And under Article 19, no state can stop the innocent passage of a vessel, even if it goes through the territorial waters of that nation. So the problem with this goes as follows. The Strait of Hormuz is not entirely in territorial waters of Iran. Matter of fact, the vast majority of it isn't. You can pass through the Strait of Hormuz without going within the territorial waters of Iran whatsoever. Take you back over here to marine traffic. This is Iranian waters, or at least parts of their Iranian waters that are identified. This here is Omani waters. Here is UAE. This is contested area right here in the center. The main passage for the Strait of Hormuz, the large kind of traffic separation scheme right here, is technically within Omani waters. Let's go back to the Iranian letter. Non-hostile vessels belonging to other associated states may, provided that they neither participate nor support acts of aggression against Iran and fully comply with the declared safety and security regulations, benefit from safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with competent Iranian authorities. There is no justification for that. You do not have to coordinate with Iran at all to technically make your passage through the Strait of Hormuz. This goes to the larger issue that we see happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz. We have this story from G-Captain. A container ship sailing from the United Arab Emirates toward Pakistan was forced to reverse course at the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, offering one of the clearest signs yet that Iran is actively asserting control over commercial shipping. AS track data reviewed by G-Captain shows that the vessel, the Saline, departed Sharjah anchorage late Monday, April 23rd, bound for Karachi. The ship proceeded northeast along a typical outbound route before making a sharp course reversal near the Hormuz approach. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy later claimed responsibility for the incident. So here we have Iran turning around a container ship bound for Pakistan because the vessel didn't meet clearance with Iran. Now, again, this is, I think, a bit of a problem because, again, Iran has no control over the Strait of Hormuz, or at least technically should not have control over the Strait of Hormuz. Then we have this Bloomberg story. Iran has started charging transit fees on some commercial vessels passing through the strait, another sign of Tehran's control over the world's most important maritime energy channel. Payments of as much as $2 million per voyage are being sought on an ad hoc basis, effectively treating an informal toll on the waterway, according to people familiar with the matter. Some vessels have made the payment, though the mechanisms wasn't immediately clear. The payments show Iran's influence over Hormuz, through which normally about a fifth of the world's oil and gas and vast amounts of food, metals, and other materials are shipped every day. So we don't know if they're tossing over $2 million in dollars. We don't know if they're doing it through some sort of offshore account. They're doing it, well, maybe they have an Iranian easy pass at the window and they're just zipping through between Lark and Qusum and going under the big scanner that's there. I don't think that's really there. I mean, it'd be awesome if it was there. It'd be pretty cool, but I don't think it's there. I think they're just getting money. I'm pretty sure it's just cash. All of this indicates not innocent passage, by the way. There's no provision in international law anywhere to set up a toll booth and shake down shipping for $2 million. This is, again, Iran using the element that they have right now, which is control of the Strait of Hormuz. So as we get to the end here, I want to talk.
Taxes was chasing updates. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert, doing it all for you.
So as we get to the end here, I want to talk a little bit about the end game for this operation, because I'm beginning to have a little bit of concerns here. Obviously, the United States has stated its objective to be, decapitate the Iranian government, which it's largely done, degrade the Iranian military, both its Air Force, its Navy, and its missile capability, which they have been doing. And now they've started a campaign to focus on the area in and around the Straits of Hormuz. American naval forces are moving into the area. We've got the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group that sailed out of Singapore. It's in the Indian Ocean. The Boxer Amphibious Ready Group set sail from San Diego. It's in the Pacific crossing. It's probably about a month at the earliest out from there. It's a bit of a passage for them to get there. You have the Lincoln Battle Group still in the Indian Ocean. The Ford is up in the Mediterranean right now, pierside in Suda Bay, undergoing repairs due to the fire on board. It's not hit by a missile. Due to the fire on board, we're talking about the Bush sailing from Norfolk at some time here in the near future, coming across. But if the U.S. is going to force open the Straits of Hormuz, this is a tough problem. If you're going to use your Marines to do this, how are you going to use the Marines? Are you going to put them on board ships as armed guards? This is a subject that was talked about in 2023. Did a video about that when that came out. Are you going to use the Marines to seize those key little islands throughout the Straits of Hormuz? It's not Karg Island. Karg Island is 400 miles up the strait. It's not at the Strait of Hormuz. But there's a series of small little islands. You put the Marines ashore there. They can use their fixed assets to use for surface-to-air and surface-to-surface missiles, use their fires to keep control. You don't have to risk putting a ship into the area if you have Marines on the ground. Or you push Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and other vessels, potentially allied vessels, coming to the assistance up into the strait. All of that is extremely costly. And I still think, even with all that, you don't get 100% success for ensuring that the Iranians are not going to take a shot at ships coming through. Now, you're never going to get 100% in that scenario. The only way you get 100% is for the U.S., Israel, and Iran to come to a ceasefire. Any sort of pushing up the strait is going to run you into problems. What comes to mind here is this book written by my good friend Nick Lambert, Warlords and the Gallipoli Disaster, How Globalized Trade Led to Britain's Worst Defeat in the First World War. I'm not saying that the Strait of Hormuz is Gallipoli. What I'm saying is operating in confined waters, even 100 years ago, was extremely difficult. Today, in the modern warfare with drones and missiles, it's even more difficult. Putting ships into a very confined strait like the Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles across, that's tough. You're going to get hit. I mean, there's no question about it. We're already seeing ships get hit, and it's only a matter of time to potentially a U.S. warship or U.S. Marines get hit if you introduce them. That means The only real solution here is either A, the US and Israel give up the Strait of Hormuz and never again sail through it because they've given de facto control to Iran, in which case Iran will make money operating a forever toll at the Strait of Hormuz, which I don't think is, number one, legal under UNCLOS, and number two, I don't think the rest of the world really wants that. Number three, how do you get Iran to back off? Well, I think the only way Iran backs off is if the US and Israel agree to stop. The problem is, can the US get Israel to agree to that? I don't know. Israel has never been in this position before where they have been able to eliminate systematically their enemies. I mean, if you look at what has happened since October 7th, they have been able to deal with Hamas, Hezbollah, and a variety of other entities and organizations, and now they're dealing with their greatest threat, which is Iran. Does Israel back off? Israel has always been a kind of a tough ally to have. Go ask the British and French about it regarding Suez in '56. This is a tough one. Can the U.S. extricate them from this position? I don't know. And that means that global trade is really in a precarious situation. We have not seen this level of disruption in global trade since the Suez closed, not with Ever Given 5 years ago, but back in 1968 during the Six-Day War, and then that was closed for 8 years. Ships were stuck in the Great Bitter Lake. They became known as the Yellow Fleet. And matter of fact, ships within the Persian Gulf now are starting to call themselves that, the Yellow Fleet, because they're not sure they're ever going to be able to get back out again. That is a scary prognosis. I don't think anybody enjoyed today's video, but if you got something out of today's video, hey, how about subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. You can share it across social media, give it a big thumb.
All right. Right natural gas is trading at 2.956. It's been ticking up. And also oil futures for WTI is at $90.42. The equity market has been drifting down a little bit. It's now trading at 6,591 for the S&P 500. So any reduced energy futures has been basically evaporated away. Now it's moving upward. All right. With that, let's please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas. It's really important to take, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. A lot of people don't realize that even if you are healthy, your pancreas doesn't function as well. So it's important to keep that pancreatic health as best as you can and give it a little bit of help in digesting the foods that you eat. You'll be able to absorb your nutrients better. Digestive enzyme complex also has bromelain, which is an enzyme to break up clots, so that's really important. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. That's really important during the cold season. I have a new product on my store, Super Strong Relief. This is a topical agent. You apply it on sore muscles, arthritis, even headaches, tension headaches. Rub it on your neck, on your temples, on your forehead. It'll relieve the pain within 30 to 90 seconds. If you have arthritis, you can use this to help relieve the pain from your arthritis. It's a great product. It works very fast. Please go to my store and get the Super Strong Relief. And also, Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients that will help you to slow down the aging process. And it focuses on a lot of different systems. It helps with cardiovascular health, helps with your immune system and your endocrine system, helps with brain function, revs up your metabolism, increases your energy levels, helps with musculature. Take it every day and it'll help you to slow down the aging process. And you can take separately or you can stack it with the Boomer Boost for added benefit. The heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. That's going to help you to slow down the aging process, help you to control your A1C levels, especially if you stack it with the boomer boost. And by soaking up free radicals, bringing down inflammation, you're helping with your brain function because you're reducing the stress on your neurons. You're helping with your cardiovascular health, reducing plaque formation. You're helping with your immune system because you're bringing down chronic inflammation. So please go to my store, get the heirloom barley. This is a month's supply, and stack it with the boomer boost for the best results. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. The link is in the description of this video. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, with that, let's listen into Al Jazeera. Let's see what's happening on Al Jazeera.
With the flow of the energy, and then they want Iranian missiles and the nuclear program not to be a threat anymore, not to destabilize the region, not to be directed at them. So on daily basis, since the beginning of the war on, there have been daily attacks. Tens of drones and dozens of missiles have been attacked here. And now, in recent days, we're seeing that the epicenter of the Iranian attacks is shifted from the United Arab Emirates toward the Kuwaitis. And that is simply sweeping between these countries. Just today, in Saudi Arabia, more than 30 drones were fired into Saudi Arabia. And then the fourth demand is that Iranian proxies across the region, whether it's in Yemen, in Lebanon, or in Iraq, they will be stopped, not further destabilizing the countries, not being a threat to the stability of the region. So these four demands are the core issues that the GCC countries are insisting on. And they're saying that at the moment, as these countries are still coming under attacks, they are not involved in these mediation efforts, but they are supporting the diplomatic track that is still ongoing between the related parties.
Brazil Sola reporting from Riyadh. Many thanks, Brazil. Tehran continued to strike targets inside Israel on Wednesday. An Iranian missile landed near the city of Haifa, sending a plume of smoke into the sky. Elsewhere, a missile caused a huge fire at a warehouse in the town of Yashresh. Al Jazeera's Noor Odeh is in Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, and is with us now. Iran continuing to mount a fight on, and showing that it can continue to strike right across Israel.
Yes, Iran is striking and evading the many air defense systems that Israel has. It has struck at Haifa, as you said, Adrian, at Deira, near a power plant, a strategic power plant that supplies about a fifth of the electricity in Israel. It has struck near an industrial zone in the Negev. Of course, in the center of Israel, where about 44% of the population lives. So the impact is felt really by a sizable portion of the population, and that's why the state of emergency is expected to be extended. The Israeli government had just pushed it to this Thursday, and it seems that that is the trend, kicking the can further down the road in the hope that at one point the easing of restrictions would be possible, but they do not seem to be so, especially in the north, where in addition to Iranian missiles, you have Hezbollah fire as well, and that is ceaseless.
Al Jazeera's Noor Odeh reporting live from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Well, many thanks. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres spoke earlier, calling for an end to the war.
My message to the United States and Israel is that it is high time to end the war, as human suffering deepens, civilian casualties mount, and the global economic impact is increasingly devastating. And my message to Iran is to stop attacking their neighbors that are not parties to the conflict. Security Council has condemned these attacks and demanded that they end.
Well, the war is threatening to push food prices even.
The problem with the UN is they're not paying attention that there is such thing as Islamic terror. And guess what? Who was funding it? Iran. Amazing. I mean, it's just, the UN is so incompetent. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the cleanse or the max 35 or max 14. Take a teaspoon a day every day. Swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity, neutralize, improve your oral pharynx, help to maintain the mucosal barrier and the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. That's really important to help to boost up your immune system. And it's neutralizing. So that's really important during the cold season. So take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season, or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Do the same protocol, swish your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow. And then go back to your maintenance dose once everything's all clear. I've been doing this for 6 years, every day, to boost up the immune system. It's really important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount the number 5. You get $5 off any order. You can use that discount as many times as you want. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
A senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins us from Tehran. Good to have you with us once again. Let me ask you, what are we to make of Iran's response to this 15-point peace proposal from the US?
Well, Iranian sources are saying that Iran has rejected the proposal. There are reasons to that. One is that the terms which have been set forth by the United States are maximalist ones, and Iran interprets this as a sign of, let's say, lack of real intentions in Washington to engage diplomatically to end the war and to reach a kind of ceasefire. But in addition to that, the United States is also deploying more forces to the region, meaning that the strategy they are pursuing militarily does not align with the tone of their, positions in terms of the negotiations. And additionally, Iran is thinking that this, stance from the U.S. side indicates that Iran's strategy of pursuing a multi-front campaign pressure against the U.S. and Israel is bearing fruits gradually, and that's the time to continue this, to inflict more costs to the United States, to make it rethink in future in case it wants and intends to attack the country again. For Tehran, more important than stopping the ongoing aggression is removing the shadow of war in the long term. So that's why Iran is not just focusing on rapid cessation of the hostility, but to getting rid of it in a long term.
So that's what you're saying, essentially, is that at this particular moment, Iran feels it has, well, not exactly the upper hand, but a good hand to play in negotiations here.
Yes, we have been seeing that the tone here in Tehran has been shifting from, let's say, fight for survival to changing the immediate threat to a long-term strategic opportunity. And that's why we are seeing that the armed forces, the political section, after trying to revive and fill the vacuums, are having a self-confidence that they can, trap the United States in a way that it will be forced to backtrack from its positions, like what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran thinks that it yet has some other cards to be played in the game. So that's why Iran thinks that maybe the initiation of this war was by the United States and Israel, but the ending, meaning the timing and the conditions, need to be set by Tehran, which is halting the aggression, and no negotiation will be taking place by the time that this is ongoing, as well as halting all, let's say, hold the war in different fronts, not just in Iran, but in Lebanon, Iraq, and against all resistant fronts. And the other conditions Iran is seeking is receiving reparations for the damages, as well as the other sides, and internationally recognizing the sovereignty over Strait of Hormuz.
Hey, think about this. We've completely destroyed the IRGC. It's fractured into 31 units. And their leaders are dead. And they are demanding at the negotiating table that they get reparations. This is the point that Trump's administration has been saying from day one. They're not wanting to really de-escalate and solve the problem. They want to play chicken. Now the question is, will Trump swerve or not? And I have a feeling that maybe Trump is going to swerve. The Iranians have no intentions of really trying to de-escalate the situation. This government that is making these statements, demanding for reparations, what the fuck? They're the ones that they're funding Islamic terrorism. Don't forget the Iran hostage crisis. Don't forget Beirut bombing. Don't forget the bombing of the coal. What about the IUDs in Iraq and Afghanistan? Let alone the funding of Hezbollah and Hamas. No, they need to capitulate, or else. What is this? Demand for reparations.
To approach to this situation with a different perspective rather than with the old one.
Good to talk to you again. Abbas, many thanks indeed for being with us. Abbas Islami there, live in Tehran. Before the US-Israeli strikes began on Iran on February 28th, more than 100 vessels made their way each day through the Strait of Hormuz. They carried oil, gas, and goods.
I'll tell you, I don't know. Trump should have never de-escalated this. He should have just kept on going. There's no real broker that he's talking to, unless it's a faction that's trying to break away, and that maybe there's some infighting between the different 31 factions of the IRGC. Who knows? But whoever Trump's dealing with probably doesn't have enough power, and that's probably the case. Please go to my store, get the collagen. This will help to remodel your joints. This is really important if you have a sports injury or arthritis. This will help with the cushioning of the joint and remodeling the cartilage. It'll help to use collagen type 2 and glucosamine to remodel the cartilage. And it'll help to use ACAN and glucosamine, or chondroitin. ACAN and chondroitin to remodel the cushioning of the joint, which is really important. This will block the pain by blocking EP4, and it will also help to reduce the joint erosion by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. All right, so this is some powerful stuff here. So take it every day. Do a little bit of resistance training, a little bit, very light resistance training to rebuild that joint. You can stack this with the collagen that I have, or take it separately. It's up to you, but you get added benefits by taking the collagen and this together. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And C60, you can get it in avocado oil, MCT coconut oil, and extra virgin olive oil. C60 has to be suspended in oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. I've been doing this for 10 years. I started taking C60 in 2016. Now, what you will notice is that your energy levels are going to go up. You will also notice that within about 2 months or so, many people have better eyesight. And you're going to improve your immune system and your endocrine system. You're going to be able to reduce plaque formation because you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. Your brain function will improve because you're bringing down stress on the neurons. You're bringing down inflammation. You're soaking up free radicals at the neuron level. The neurons will have healthier mitochondria and more energy to produce neurotransmitters. So you'll, over time, build positive neuroplasticity. You'll be thinking faster. You'll have better memory. There's lots of benefits that you get from taking C60 every day. Teaspoon a day. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. Now, this will also help with your skin because it improves the health of the basal layer of your skin where new cells, skin cells are being produced. This stacks really well with resveratrol, especially for the basal layer. So please go to my store and get the C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you get the higher ounce configuration. I want you also to use discount 5 to save some money. All caps, discount 5 on any order. Again, this stacks really well with resveratrol. It also stacks well with the Max 35. You'll notice that if you take the Max 35 cleanse or Max 14, that you'll actually have better breathing. You'll notice that you're breathing better. All right? Because what you're doing is you're bringing down inflammation, you're boosting up that immune system, and the bronchioles are actually expanding. So you're gonna be able to breathe a little bit better. Now, another thing that you'll notice that's really important here is that you can stack this with Boomer Boost to help with soaking up those free radicals and slowing down that aging process. And this stacks well with the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans. So if you've been paying attention to me for years, I've been telling you that the core of the anti-aging protocol is the following. Take a multivitamin, get my multivitamin from my store, take the probiotics, that's the foundation. And the pillars of this anti-aging protocol are the following. The first pillar, Max 35 cleanse or Max 14 to boost up that innate immune system. The second pillar, the C60 to soak up those free radicals. The third pillar, the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up your immune system, help with your cardiovascular system, and brain function. And the Boomer Boost to rev up that metabolism and your energy levels. And you'll get lots of other benefits from Boomer Boost, like brain function, cardiovascular health, and musculature. And so if you pay attention to that protocol that I just mentioned, it's targeting all the major elements that are causing aging. And so it works synergistically to radically slow down the aging process. You do this regularly, you will get healthy. Now, if you stack it with proper diet, exercise, mindfulness, proper sleep, doing some resistance training, some cardio, some stretching, and balancing exercises to activate that cerebellum, you're doing these things on a regular basis and learning new things, you are radically slowing down the aging process and not atrophying, mentally or physically. Now, I just gave you the recipe on slowing down aging. So you're not part of a cohort group that's dependent on pharmacopoeia. Do you want to be dependent on medications when you get older? Or do you want to have a more a lifestyle that has more vitality? Or do you want to just keep on spending a lot of money on pharmacopoeia and seeing doctors that aren't really solving the problem? It's up to you. And most of the diseases in the United States are self-induced. All right? Diabetes, cardiovascular, that's self-induced in most cases. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the great supplements that I offer, and make sure that you use discount 5. I want you to save some money. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.